When a rusted 1974 Dodge rolled into America's most elite automotive competition, nobody expected what was hiding under that peeling paint. A single father, dismissed and mocked by millionaire executives, was about to reveal an engine that would make billion-dollar corporations look like amateurs. But this isn't just about a machine. This is about a man who built the impossible while the world wasn't watching. A widower who turned grief into genius in a tiny garage at midnight, raising his daughter alone, refusing to break. What happened next changed everything. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The security guard at the VIP entrance didn't bother hiding his laugh. "Sir, deliveries go around back," he said, pointing toward the service road with barely concealed amusement. "This entrance is for competition participants only." Ethan Walker kept both hands on the steering wheel of his 1974 Dodge and didn't respond immediately. The morning cold had turned his breath to fog inside the car. The heater hadn't worked in 2 years. Beside him in the passenger seat, his 6-year-old daughter Lily sat bundled in 3 layers, her small hands tucked into mittens that were too big for her. "We're participants," Ethan said quietly, reaching for the registration packet on the dashboard. The guard's smile faded into confusion, then returned his outright disbelief. He leaned down to get a better look at the car. The Dodge's paint had oxidized into a patchwork of rust and faded blue. The windshield had a crack running from corner to corner. The rear license plate hung from a single bolt, rattling every time Ethan touched the brakes. This vehicle looked like it belonged in a scrapyard, not at the Detroit International Automotive Innovation Summit, the most prestigious engineering competition in North America. "You're joking," the guard said flatly. Ethan handed him the registration form through the window. The paper was crisp, official, stamped with the competition's seal. The guard studied it for a long moment, his expression shifting from skepticism to something closer to pity. "This is real. It's real. And you're actually planning to compete? In this?" Ethan nodded once. Lily looked up at him with wide brown eyes, waiting. She had learned over the past 3 years not to ask too many questions when adults stared at them like this. It happened often enough that she recognized the pattern, the disbelief, the judgment, the barely disguised contempt. The guard shook his head slowly, then waved them through with visible reluctance. "Bay 14, try not to leak oil on the pavement." Ethan drove forward without acknowledging the insult. The Dodge's engine made a sound like distant thunder, deep and steady, completely unlike the grinding rattle the exterior suggested it should produce. The guard noticed but didn't comment. He was already turning his attention to the next arrival, a gleaming black prototype worth more than most people's houses. The convention center parking area looked like an exotic car show. $1 million vehicles lined the designated bays, each surrounded by teams of engineers in branded jackets. Corporate logos gleamed on polished hoods. Photographers circled the most impressive entries, cameras clicking. Somewhere near the main entrance, a news crew was setting up for interviews. Ethan pulled into Bay 14 and killed the engine. For a moment, he and Lily sat in silence, watching the activity around them. Nobody was looking in their direction yet. That would change soon enough. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was small. "Why are they all so shiny?" "Because they want people to look at them," Ethan said. He unbuckled his seatbelt and turned to face her. "But you know what matters more than looking pretty?" "What?" "Actually working." She considered this seriously, then nodded. "Like your engine?" "Like my engine." They climbed out of the car together. The cold hit immediately, sharper than it had been inside. Ethan pulled Lily's hood up and made sure her scarf covered her neck. She tolerated this patiently, used to his constant checking. He had been doing it since her mother died. The endless small confirmations that she was warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. Sometimes he wondered if he did it for her or for himself. The look started as soon as they were visible. A team of engineers from a California tech firm stopped their conversation mid-sentence to stare. A woman in an expensive coat actually pulled out her phone to take a picture, not even trying to be subtle about it. 2 men in suits standing near a silver concept car exchanged glances and smirked. Ethan ignored all of it. He opened the Dodge's trunk. It required slamming it with his shoulder first to break the seal of rust, and pulled out a worn canvas bag containing his documentation. 3 years of handwritten calculations, sketches, test results. Everything he needed to prove the engine was his own work, built without corporate backing or university resources. "Stay close," he told Lily, taking her hand. They walked toward the registration building together. The contrast between them and everyone else was impossible to miss. While other participants wore tailored clothes and carried tablets, Ethan was dressed in a flannel shirt with a patched elbow and work boots that had seen better days. Lily's winter coat was clean, but obviously second-hand, a size too large so she could grow into it. Near the VIP entrance, a small crowd had gathered around someone important. Ethan could tell by the body language, the way people angled toward her, laughing a beat too quickly at whatever she said, maintaining just enough distance to show respect. The woman at the center was younger than he expected, maybe 30, with sharp features and the kind of confident posture that came from never having to justify your presence anywhere. Claire Bennett. He recognized her from magazine covers. CEO of Velocity Automotive Systems, one of the fastest-growing manufacturers in the country. She had built her company from almost nothing in less than a decade, and the business press treated her like royalty because of it. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost calculated, professionally styled dark hair, a coat that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent, jewelry that managed to be both minimal and obviously expensive. But it was her expression that caught his attention. Watching her smile at the executives surrounding her, Ethan recognized something familiar. It was the same expression he sometimes saw in the mirror, someone working very hard to maintain a facade, to project control and certainty even when the world felt anything but certain. Then her eyes landed on him and Lily, and the facade didn't crack so much as sharpen into something colder. She said something to the man beside her, a gray-haired executive Ethan didn't recognize, and they both looked directly at the rusted Dodge in Bay 14. Claire's mouth curved into a smile that had nothing warm in it. She excused herself from the group and started walking toward them. Ethan's first instinct was to turn away, to get Lily inside before this went somewhere ugly, but he had promised himself 3 years ago that he wouldn't run anymore. Not from grief, not from fear, not from people who looked at him and saw only failure. So he stood still and waited. Claire stopped a few feet away, her expensive boots clicking against the pavement. Up close, she was even more intimidating, taller than he expected, with eyes that took in everything about him in seconds. The threadbare flannel, the calloused hands, the little girl clinging to his side. "Are you lost?" she asked. Her voice was smooth, professional, with just enough edge to make it clear she already knew the answer. "No," Ethan said simply. "That's your car?" She gestured toward the Dodge without looking at it, as if she couldn't quite bring herself to acknowledge it directly. "Yes. And you're here to compete." It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. "Yes." Claire's smile widened. The executives who had followed her were watching now, clearly entertained. One of them, a man in a navy suit with silver cufflinks, actually laughed out loud. "That's adorable," Claire said. The word landed like a slap. "Really? I appreciate the confidence, but maybe you should check the registration requirements again. This is an innovation summit, not a classic car show. We're showcasing the future of automotive engineering, not the past." "I read the requirements," Ethan said. His voice stayed level, but Lily squeezed his hand tighter. She might not understand all the words, but she understood tone. She had heard people talk to her father like this before. "Then you know this competition is for cutting-edge technology. Prototypes that represent genuine advances in efficiency, performance, sustainability." Claire finally glanced at the Dodge, her expression dripping with disdain. "What exactly does that represent? A midlife crisis?" The executives laughed. It was polite corporate laughter, restrained enough to maintain professionalism, but loud enough to make sure Ethan heard it. He should have been angry, part of him was, but mostly he just felt tired. Tired of being looked at like this. Tired of defending himself to people who had already decided what he was worth based on appearances. "The engine," he said quietly. "I'm competing with the engine." "The engine," Claire repeated the words like she was tasting something unpleasant. "In that?" "Yes." "And you built this engine yourself?" "Yes." "In a professional facility? With a team?" "In my garage. Alone." The laughter this time wasn't polite. It was genuine disbelief mixed with mockery. The man in the navy suit shook his head like he'd just heard the punchline to a particularly good joke. Claire studied Ethan for a long moment, her amusement fading into something that looked almost like pity. "Listen," she said, her tone softening just slightly. "I'm sure you worked very hard on whatever you've done to that car. And I'm sure it means a lot to you, but this competition isn't a charity event. Every other participant here has millions of dollars in R&D backing them, teams of engineers, access to facilities and resources you can't even imagine. You're going to embarrass yourself." "Maybe," Ethan said. "Definitely." She glanced down at Lily, and for just a second something flickered across her face, recognition, perhaps, of the uncomfortable reality that there was a child watching this interaction. But the moment passed quickly. "Take my advice. Go home. Spend time with your daughter. Don't waste your registration fee on something that's only going to end in humiliation." She turned to leave, clearly considering the conversation finished. "I'm not leaving," Ethan said. Claire stopped. When she turned back, the pity was gone, replaced by irritation. "Excuse me?" "I'm not leaving. I registered legally. I have every right to compete." "Having the right to do something doesn't make it a good idea." "I'll take my chances." They stared at each other for a beat too long. Around them, the parking area had grown quieter. Other teams were watching now, sensing conflict. Someone had their phone out, recording. Claire's jaw tightened. "Fine," she said crisply. "Embarrass yourself if you want, but don't expect special treatment when you fail." She walked away without waiting for a response, her entourage following. The man in the navy suit glanced back once, shaking his head in what looked like genuine disbelief. Ethan watched them go, his hand still holding Lily's. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was very small. "Is she mean?" "She doesn't know us," Ethan said, which wasn't really an answer. "Come on, we need to check in." The registration building was warmer, at least. A young woman behind the desk processed Ethan's paperwork with professional efficiency, though her eyes kept drifting to Lily with visible curiosity. Children weren't common at events like this. "You'll be in the innovation category," she explained, handing him a laminated badge. "Preliminary judging starts at 2 p.m. You'll have 15 minutes to present your work to the technical panel. If you advance, finals are tomorrow morning." "Understood. And just so you're aware," she hesitated, clearly trying to phrase something diplomatically. "The innovation category is extremely competitive this year. We have entries from Velocity, Titan Motors, Hartley Engineering, basically every major player in the industry. So, just manage your expectations." "I will." She didn't look convinced, but she handed him an information packet anyway. "Good luck." They spent the next few hours in the convention center's public area, where manufacturers had set up displays showcasing their latest technology. Lily pressed her face against the glass barriers, marveling at the sleek prototypes and interactive screens. Ethan let her look, grateful for anything that kept her entertained and warm. He noticed people staring occasionally. Word had apparently spread about the rusted Dodge and its owner. Small groups of engineers would walk past, glance at his badge, and exchange knowing looks. A few were openly contemptuous. Most just seemed confused about why he was there. Around noon, Ethan bought them lunch from one of the overpriced vendor stalls. A sandwich for him, chicken nuggets for Lily. They ate sitting on a bench near the back of the hall, away from the crowds. "Are you nervous?" Lily asked, swinging her legs. "A little," Ethan admitted. "Mama used to say being nervous means you care about something." The mention of Sarah hit him harder than he expected. Even after 3 years, he swallowed against the sudden tightness in his throat. She was right about that. "Do you think she would like your engine?" "Yeah," Ethan said softly. "I think she would." Lily considered this while chewing a nugget. "Then it doesn't matter what the mean lady thinks." Out of the mouths of 6-year-olds. Ethan managed a real smile for the first time that day. "You're pretty smart, you know that?" "I know," Lily said seriously, which made him laugh. At 1:30, they made their way toward the judging area. The innovation category presentations were being held in a large conference room on the second floor. By the time Ethan arrived, a crowd had already gathered, participants waiting their turn, corporate representatives observing the competition, journalists looking for stories. And there, near the front of the room, was Claire Bennett. She was talking to a tall man in an expensive suit, someone else Ethan didn't recognize. But the way she stood, arms crossed, expression intense, suggested this was a serious conversation. The man nodded several times, then glanced toward the registration desk where Ethan's name was listed on the schedule. Something about that look made Ethan's instincts flare with warning, but before he could process it, an official was calling his name. "Ethan Walker, you're up next." The presentation room was intimidating in its formality. 5 judges sat behind a long table at the front, each with tablets and printed materials in front of them. 2 were older men with decades of automotive engineering experience written into every line of their faces. 1 was a younger woman who Ethan recognized as a professor from MIT. The other 2 were corporate representatives, one from a major manufacturer, one from a technology investment firm. They all looked up as Ethan entered, and he watched their expressions shift in real time. Confusion, skepticism. In one case, barely concealed disdain. "Mr. Walker," the lead judge said, consulting his notes, "you're presenting an original combustion engine design. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "And this is a working prototype, not a theoretical design." "It's fully functional. I drove here with it this morning." One of the judges, the older man on the left, actually raised his eyebrows at that. "You drove here? In what vehicle?" "A 1974 Dodge Coronet." Silence. Then the woman from MIT leaned forward. "You're telling us you've installed an experimental engine in a 50-year-old vehicle and drove it to this competition?" "Yes, ma'am." "That seems—" She exchanged glances with her fellow judges. "Unconventional." "The engine works," Ethan said simply. "I can show you." The corporate representative from the investment firm looked openly skeptical. "Mr. Walker, I've reviewed your registration materials. You claim to have designed this entirely independently, with no institutional support or corporate backing." "That's correct." "No team of engineers?" "Just me." "No access to professional facilities or testing equipment?" "I built it in my garage." The skepticism in the room was thick enough to cut. The lead judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Walker, I'm sure you understand this is difficult to believe. The level of engineering required for a genuine innovation in combustion technology is substantial. Major corporations spend millions on R&D and still struggle to achieve meaningful advances. You're claiming to have accomplished this alone, at home, with what I assume were minimal resources." "I'm not claiming anything," Ethan said. His voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath. "I built it. It works. You can test it yourselves if you don't believe me." The older judge on the left leaned back in his chair, studying Ethan with renewed interest. "What's the core innovation? What makes this engine different?" This was the question Ethan had been waiting for. He pulled his documentation from the canvas bag. 3 years of work, condensed into handwritten notes and technical drawings. The judges passed the materials between them, and he watched their expressions shift as they began to read. The skepticism didn't disappear, but it cracked. Just a little. "This combustion chamber design," the MIT professor said slowly, pointing to one of Ethan's sketches. "This is unusual. Where did you get the idea for this geometry?" "Fluid dynamics research," Ethan said. "I was looking at ways to optimize fuel mixture and ignition timing simultaneously. Traditional designs treat them as separate problems, but I thought if you could integrate them at the chamber level, you could reduce waste heat and improve efficiency," the professor finished. She looked up at him sharply. "This isn't in any published literature I've seen." "That's because I developed it myself." "From what foundation? What prior research?" "Everything from thermodynamics textbooks to aerospace engineering papers, whatever I could find at the library or online." The lead judge flipped through more pages, his frown deepening. "These calculations are complex, high-level mathematics. You taught yourself this?" "I have a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering," Ethan said. "I never finished my master's because—" He hesitated. "Life got in the way, but I kept reading, kept learning." What he didn't say, he had kept learning because the alternative was sitting alone in an empty house, drowning in grief after Sarah died. The engine had started as a distraction, something to focus on during the endless nights when sleep wouldn't come. It had become something more, a promise, a purpose. The only thing that made him feel like he was still moving forward instead of just surviving. The judges were conferring quietly now, passing the documentation between them with increasing interest. The corporate representatives still looked skeptical, but the others were clearly taking this more seriously than they had when Ethan first walked in. Finally, the lead judge looked up. Mr. Walker, these documents are impressive, but documents aren't proof. You understand we'll need to see the actual engine, test it under controlled conditions, verify your claims independently. I understand. We'd also need to confirm this is genuinely your own work. No offense, but given the sophistication of what you're describing, we have to rule out the possibility that you're representing someone else's design. None taken, Ethan said. Test whatever you want. Ask me anything about the design. I can explain every decision, every calculation. This is my work. The older judge on the left smiled slightly. I almost believe you, son, but almost isn't good enough for a competition of this caliber. He made a note on his tablet. We'll schedule a technical review of your engine for later this afternoon. Bring the vehicle to Testing Bay 3 at 4 p.m. We'll run diagnostics, take measurements, ask detailed questions about the engineering. If everything checks out, he paused. Well, we'll see. It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't dismissal either. Ethan nodded. Thank you. As he left the presentation room, he found Lily waiting exactly where he'd left her, sitting in a chair that was too big for her, legs swinging. She looked up anxiously when she saw him. How did it go? They want to test the engine. Is that good? Yeah, Ethan said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. Yeah, that's good. They had 2 hours before the testing appointment. Ethan took Lily back outside to the parking area, both because she was getting restless and because he needed to prepare the Dodge for whatever the judges were about to throw at it. The afternoon had grown colder. Dark clouds were rolling in from the west, threatening snow. Ethan popped the hood of the Dodge while Lily sat on the front bumper, bundled in her coat. The engine beneath the hood didn't match the car's exterior. Where the body was rusted and beaten, the engine was pristine. Every component carefully machined, every connection precise. It looked like something from a different world, high-tech and purposeful, completely out of place in the aging vehicle surrounding it. Ethan ran through his pre-check routine, the same process he'd followed hundreds of times in his garage. Oil levels, coolant, electrical connections. Everything had to be perfect. Mr. Walker. He looked up to find a man standing a few feet away. Mid-40s, expensive suit, expression that managed to be both professional and vaguely threatening. Ethan recognized him, the tall man who had been talking to Claire Bennett earlier. Can I help you? Ethan asked. Marcus Hendricks, the man said, not offering his hand. Director of Research and Development for Velocity Automotive Systems. Okay. I wanted to talk to you before your technical review. Something in his tone immediately put Ethan on guard. About what? Hendricks glanced at Lily, then back at Ethan. Perhaps we could speak privately. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here. Hendricks' jaw tightened slightly, but he nodded. Fine. I'll be direct. I'm aware of your scheduled testing session this afternoon. I'm also aware that the judges seem to be taking your claims seriously, which frankly surprises me. But before this goes any further, I want to make something very clear. What's that? If you're planning some kind of fraud, representing stolen technology, passing off corporate research as your own work, anything of that nature, you should withdraw now. Velocity has significant legal resources, Mr. Walker. If we discover you've misappropriated proprietary designs, we will pursue action to the fullest extent of the law, and I promise you that will not end well for you or your daughter. The implied threat hung in the cold air between them. Ethan felt anger rising in his chest, hot and immediate. Are you accusing me of stealing your company's work? I'm saying the technology you're claiming to have developed independently bears certain similarities to research we've been conducting. Similarities that concern me. I've never worked for your company. I've never even been inside your facilities. Then you have nothing to worry about. Hendricks smiled without warmth. But understand that we'll be watching very closely. Every claim you make, every specification you provide, we'll verify it all. And if there's even a hint of intellectual property theft, he let the sentence hang. Ethan stepped away from the car, moving between Hendricks and Lily without thinking about it. I built this engine myself, from the ground up, with my own hands and my own ideas. I don't care what your company has been working on. I don't care what similarities you think you see. This is mine. We'll see about that. Hendricks turned and walked away before Ethan could respond. Watching him go, Ethan felt the anger mixing with something else. Worry. Not because he had done anything wrong, but because he suddenly understood what was happening. Claire Bennett's company felt threatened, and when powerful corporations felt threatened, they didn't fight fair. "Daddy?" Lily's voice pulled him back. "Who was that man?" "Nobody important," Ethan lied. He closed the hood carefully and checked his watch. Still an hour before the testing appointment. "Come on, let's get you something warm to drink." They went back inside, found a quiet corner of the convention center, and waited. Ethan tried to focus on calming his nerves, but his mind kept circling back to Hendrik's thinly veiled threats. He had spent 3 years building something extraordinary. He had poured everything he had into this engine. Every spare dollar, every midnight hour after Lily fell asleep, every piece of himself he could spare while still being a decent father. And now someone was trying to take it from him before anyone had even seen what it could do. No. Ethan shut down that line of thinking. He couldn't afford to spiral into fear and anger. Not now. The testing session would prove what the engine was. The judges would see the truth. Everything else was just noise. At 3:45, they made their way to Testing Bay 3. The testing facility was a serious operation. Professional diagnostic equipment, multiple computer stations, a hydraulic lift for accessing the undercarriage. The 5 judges were already there, along with 2 technicians who would be running the actual tests. And standing near the back of the room, arms crossed, was Claire Bennett. She met Ethan's eyes and didn't look away. There was challenge in her expression, but also curiosity, like she still couldn't quite figure out what she was looking at. "Mr. Walker," the lead judge said, "drive your vehicle into position, please. We'll need to connect our diagnostic systems." Ethan did as instructed, carefully maneuvering the Dodge onto the testing platform. Lily stayed near the entrance, watching with wide eyes as the technicians attached sensors and cables to various points on the engine. The MIT professor approached with a tablet in hand. "Mr. Walker, we're going to run a series of standardized tests. Emission levels, fuel efficiency, power output, thermal management. We'll also be asking you technical questions throughout the process to verify your understanding of the design. Is that acceptable?" "Completely." "Good. Let's start with a basic function test. Start the engine, please." Ethan turned the key. The sound that filled Testing Bay 3 was like nothing else in the building. It wasn't the aggressive roar of a muscle car or the high-pitched whine of a modern performance engine. It was deeper than that, smoother, almost musical in its precision. The engine ran so evenly that the Dodge barely vibrated. Every head in the room turned toward the car. The technicians checked their screens, frowned, checked again. One of them looked up at the lead judge with an expression of confusion. "Sir, these readings, what about them? They don't make sense. The combustion efficiency is showing at 92%. That's not possible with conventional design." The lead judge moved to look at the screen himself. His frown deepened. "Run it again." They ran it again. The numbers didn't change. The older judge on the left walked around the car slowly, listening to the engine with the kind of attention that only came from decades of experience. He stopped at the hood, then looked at Ethan. "May I?" Ethan nodded. The judge opened the hood, and the room went silent. Everyone crowded forward to see. Even Claire moved closer, though she maintained her distance from the others. The engine beneath the hood looked like art. Precision machined components fitted together with tolerances that required professional equipment to achieve. But more than that, it looked wrong in a way that made experienced engineers stop and stare. "This combustion chamber geometry," the MIT professor said softly, pointing but not touching. "This isn't theoretical anymore. You actually built this." "Yes, ma'am. And these intake manifolds, the angle is completely non-standard. How did you calculate the optimal configuration?" Ethan launched into an explanation, walking them through his reasoning, his testing methodology, the incremental improvements he had made over hundreds of iterations. He spoke clearly and precisely, answering every technical question without hesitation. The judges listened with increasing attention. Even the skeptical corporate representative had stopped looking dismissive. "Run the full diagnostic suite," the lead judge ordered. "I want measurements on everything." The testing took over an hour. They measured emissions, far cleaner than comparable engines. They measured fuel consumption, significantly lower. They measured power output, substantially higher than the displacement should have allowed. Every number that came back made the judges look more unsettled. Finally, they asked Ethan to shut down the engine. The sudden silence felt wrong after the steady hum. The 5 judges huddled together, speaking in low voices. Ethan couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could see their body language, animated, argumentative, occasionally glancing back at the Dodge with expressions of disbelief. Claire Bennett approached him while the judges deliberated. She had been watching the entire testing session without saying a word, and now she looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Where did you learn to do this?" she asked. "Books, online courses, trial and error." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." She studied him for a long moment. "You're not what I expected." "Most people don't expect much when they see that car," Ethan said. "I wasn't talking about the car." Before he could respond, the lead judge called everyone's attention. "Mr. Walker, if you could join us, please." Ethan walked over, aware of everyone watching. Lily had moved closer to the entrance, still sitting on a bench but clearly paying attention. She knew something important was happening, even if she didn't understand the details. The lead judge looked tired, like someone who had just had every assumption challenged. "Mr. Walker, I've been evaluating automotive engineering for 20 years. In that time, I've seen a lot of impressive work from very talented people with very significant resources." He paused. "What you've built, I've never seen anything quite like it." "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet, because what I'm about to say is that I don't understand how this is possible. The level of precision, the sophistication of the design, the integration of multiple advanced concepts, this should have required a team, a facility, significant funding. And you're telling me you did this alone in a residential garage?" "Yes, sir." "With what equipment?" "Basic machining tools. Some custom fabrication work I had to outsource when I couldn't do it myself. A computer for modeling and calculations. Whatever I could afford on what I make as a maintenance supervisor." One of the other judges shook his head slowly. "That shouldn't be possible." "And yet," the MIT professor said quietly, "clearly it is." The lead judge ran a hand through his gray hair. "Mr. Walker, we need to be very clear about something. If you advance from the preliminary round, your engine is going to attract significant attention. Media, industry representatives, potential investors, the kind of scrutiny that will examine every aspect of your work." His eyes were serious. "If there's anything you're not being honest about, anything at all, this is the time to say so." "There's nothing," Ethan said. "I built it. It's mine. Everything I've told you is the truth." The judges exchanged glances. Finally, the lead judge nodded. "Then congratulations, Mr. Walker. You're advancing to the final round tomorrow morning." The words took a moment to register. When they did, Ethan felt something loosen in his chest that he hadn't realized was tight. "Thank you." "Don't thank us yet," the corporate representative said dryly. "The finals are going to make this look like a warm-up." The judges dismissed him, and Ethan walked back toward Lily in something approaching a daze. She jumped up when she saw his expression. "We won?" she asked. "Not yet," Ethan said, "but we're still in it." She hugged him hard enough that he had to take a step back to keep his balance. Over her head, he saw Claire Bennett still watching him from across the testing bay. Their eyes met, and this time she didn't look away first. She nodded once, acknowledgement, perhaps, or respect, or maybe just recognition that she had been wrong about something. Ethan nodded back, then guided Lily toward the exit. They had a lot to do before tomorrow, but for the first time since Sarah died, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The hotel room was cheaper than Ethan had wanted, but better than he could really afford. Lily fell asleep almost immediately after dinner, curled under blankets that smelled faintly of industrial detergent. Ethan sat at the small desk by the window, reviewing his notes for tomorrow's final presentation under the dim light of a lamp that flickered when trucks passed on the street below. His phone buzzed. A text from his neighbor back home, Mrs. Chen, who had been watching their apartment while they were gone. "How did it go?" Ethan typed back. "Made it to finals tomorrow morning." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, Sarah would be proud. He stared at those 4 words until his vision blurred. Then he set the phone down and went back to his notes, because thinking about Sarah right now would break something in him that he couldn't afford to have broken. Not yet. Not until this was over. The engineering calculations swam in front of his eyes. He had been over them 1,000 times, knew every equation by heart, but his brain kept circling back to Marcus Hendricks and that thinly veiled threat. Similarities to research we've been conducting. The words had teeth, and Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow was going to be about more than just proving his engine worked. Sleep came in fragments. Every time he started to drift off, his mind jerked him back awake with new anxieties. What if the judges had reconsidered overnight? What if Velocity found some legal angle to disqualify him? What if he got up there in front of everyone and forgot how to explain his own work? At 5:30, he gave up and took a shower. The water pressure was weak and the temperature never quite stabilized, but it helped him feel slightly more human. By the time Lily woke up at 6:15, he had coffee from the lobby and was running through his presentation mentally for the dozenth time. "Big day," Lily said, rubbing her eyes. "Yeah. Are you scared?" Ethan considered lying, then decided she deserved better. "A little. Me too." She climbed into his lap without asking, something she only did when she was worried. "What happens if you don't win?" "We go home. I keep my job at the plant. Everything stays the same." "And if you do win?" That was the harder question. Ethan had been so focused on just getting here, just proving the engine worked, that he hadn't let himself think much beyond that. Winning meant attention, visibility, the kind of scrutiny that could change everything about their quiet, careful life. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we'll figure it out together, okay?" She nodded against his chest. They sat like that for a while, watching the gray morning light creep across the room, neither of them quite ready to start the day that would determine everything. They arrived at the convention center at 7:30. The finals weren't scheduled until 9, but Ethan wanted time to check the Dodge one more time, make sure nothing had gone wrong overnight. The parking area was already busy with early arrivals, corporate teams doing last-minute preparations, media setting up for coverage, officials running final checks on the presentation venue. The Dodge sat exactly where Ethan had left it, rust and all. He popped the hood and started his inspection routine while Lily sat on the front bumper, watching people walk past and stare. "They still think it's funny," she observed. "Let them think whatever they want." But she was right. The looks hadn't changed. If anything, they had gotten worse now that word had spread about the preliminary results. Ethan could hear fragments of conversations as people passed. "That's the guy with the junk car." Judges must have lost their minds, probably rigged the sensors somehow. He ignored all of it and focused on the engine. Oil levels good, coolant good, all connections tight, everything exactly as it should be. "Mr. Walker," Ethan looked up to find the older judge from yesterday approaching, the one who had smiled slightly when Ethan said he'd explain every decision. Up close, and without the formal setting of the testing bay, he looked more grandfatherly, wrinkled face, kind eyes, the comfortable posture of someone who had nothing left to prove. "Morning," Ethan said, straightening. "Robert Chen," the judge said, offering his hand. "I wanted to talk to you before the circus starts." They shook. Chen's grip was firm, but not aggressive. "About what?" "About what you're walking into." Chen glanced around, making sure they had relative privacy. "I've been doing this for a long time, son. Long enough to recognize when something genuinely new shows up. What you built? That's not just impressive. That's potentially industry-changing, and that means you're about to have a target on your back." "I already got that impression yesterday. From Marcus Hendricks, I assume." Chen's expression soured slightly. "Yeah, I saw him talking to you. Let me guess. He implied you stole Velocity's research?" "Something like that." "He's lying, or at least exaggerating." Chen leaned against the Dodge's fender, apparently unconcerned about the rust. "I consulted for Velocity 2 years ago on a combustion efficiency project. I know what they've been working on. Your design shares some conceptual similarities, but the implementation is completely different. You didn't steal anything." "Then why threaten me?" "Because Claire Bennett is scared." Chen said it matter-of-factly, without judgment. "She's built her entire company on being the innovation leader in this space, and now some unknown guy shows up with technology that could make her entire R&D department look obsolete. She's not going to take that gracefully." Ethan felt his jaw tighten. "So what am I supposed to do? Win anyway." Chen smiled, "But understand that winning today is just the beginning. If you take first place, you're going to have every major manufacturer in the country trying to figure out how to either buy your technology or bury it. The pressure is going to be intense. I can handle pressure. Can you? Chen's eyes were sharp despite the grandfatherly demeanor. Because from where I'm standing, you're a single father with no legal representation, no business experience, and no idea how to navigate corporate warfare. You've got talent, son. Maybe genius-level talent. But talent alone won't protect you from what's coming. The words sat heavy in the cold morning air. Ethan wanted to argue, to insist he could handle whatever came next, but Chen's assessment was brutally accurate. He had spent 3 years building an engine. He had spent exactly 0 hours thinking about what happened if he actually succeeded. So what do you suggest? He asked quietly. Lawyer up. Today, if possible, before you sign anything or make any deals. Chen pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it over. This is a friend of mine, intellectual property specialist. She's good, she's honest, and she doesn't intimidate easily. Give her a call after the finals, regardless of how it goes. Ethan took the card. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Just promise me you'll be careful. What you've built deserves to see the light of day. Don't let anyone take it from you because you were too proud or too naive to get proper help. Chen walked away before Ethan could respond, leaving him standing there with a business card and a growing sense that he was in over his head in ways he hadn't fully appreciated. Was that a nice man? Lily asked. Yeah, Ethan said. I think he was. By 8:30, the crowd around the presentation venue had grown substantially. The finals were open to the public, which meant anyone with a registration badge could attend. Ethan spotted corporate executives, journalists with recording equipment, even what looked like patent lawyers with their tablets and serious expressions. And there, near the front entrance, was Claire Bennett. She was dressed differently today. Less severe, more approachable, though still clearly expensive. She was talking to Marcus Hendricks, their heads close together in a way that suggested serious discussion. As Ethan watched, Hendricks gestured emphatically, clearly arguing something. Claire listened, her expression unreadable, then shook her head. Whatever Hendricks was pushing for, she wasn't agreeing. The interaction ended with Hendricks walking away looking frustrated, and Claire standing alone, arms crossed, staring at nothing in particular. Then her eyes found Ethan across the crowd, and something complicated flickered across her face before she looked away. At 8:45, officials started directing people into the auditorium. The finals were being held in the convention center's main hall, a space large enough to hold several hundred people. Ethan found a seat near the back, Lily beside him, and watched as the room filled with industry professionals who had come to see which new technology would dominate the conversation for the next year. The lead judge from yesterday took the stage at precisely 9 o'clock. He spent a few minutes outlining the format. Each finalist would give a 15-minute presentation followed by 10 minutes of questions from the judging panel. 5 finalists total. Ethan was scheduled third. The first presentation was from Hartley Engineering, a mid-sized firm known for hybrid technology. Their entry was a new battery management system that promised faster charging and longer range. The presentation was polished, professional, backed by extensive data and slick graphics. The judges asked pointed questions about scalability and manufacturing costs. The Hartley team answered confidently, clearly well-rehearsed. When they finished, the audience applauded politely. Industry professionals evaluating other industry professionals. Nothing personal, just business. The second presentation was from Titan Motors, one of the largest manufacturers in North America. They had developed a lightweight composite material for engine components that reduced weight without sacrificing durability. The presentation was even more polished than Hartley's, complete with a video demonstration and testimonials from test drivers. The judges looked impressed but not surprised. This was the kind of incremental innovation they expected from major players. More polite applause. Then it was Ethan's turn. He stood up, took Lily's hand, and walked toward the stage. He could feel hundreds of eyes on them, the single father in the flannel shirt and the 6-year-old girl who shouldn't be at an engineering competition. Whispers followed them down the aisle. At the stage, Ethan stopped and looked down at Lily. You okay here? I want to come with you. Sweetie, you can't. Please. Her eyes were wide and worried. I don't want to sit alone. Ethan glanced at the judges. The lead judge looked surprised, but made a small gesture that might have been permission. The rules didn't technically forbid it. Okay, Ethan said, but you have to be very quiet. Can you do that? Lily nodded seriously. They climbed the stairs together. Ethan positioned her in a chair at the edge of the stage where she'd be out of the way but still visible to him. Then he turned to face the audience and felt his stomach drop. This was different from yesterday's preliminary session. This was hundreds of people, all watching him with varying degrees of skepticism, curiosity, and outright hostility. The lights were brighter, the silence more oppressive. He could see Claire Bennett in the third row, her expression carefully neutral. Marcus Hendricks sat 2 seats away, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Mr. Walker," the lead judge said, "whenever you're ready." Ethan took a breath and began. 3 years ago, I lost my wife to cancer. She was 30 years old. We had a 6-year-old daughter and about $8,000 in medical debt that insurance wouldn't cover. After the funeral, I had a choice. I could fall apart, or I could find something to hold on to. This wasn't the opening anyone had expected. The room went very quiet. I chose an engine. Ethan's voice was steady, but not rehearsed. He was just telling the truth. Not because I'm some genius inventor, or because I had a grand vision for changing the automotive industry. I chose it because I needed a problem I could solve, something with clear rules and measurable results, something that made sense when nothing else did. He pulled up his first slide. Not a slick corporate presentation, but a simple photograph of his garage. Tools on pegboards. A workbench covered in sketches. The Dodge's engine in pieces on the floor. This is where I built it. A 1-car garage behind a duplex in a neighborhood where car alarms go off so often you stop hearing them. I worked nights after my daughter went to sleep. Weekends when I could find someone to watch her for a few hours. Every spare dollar I had went into parts and materials. Next slide. Technical drawings. All handwritten. The judges leaned forward slightly. The core innovation is in the combustion chamber geometry. Traditional designs optimize for either fuel efficiency or power output, but not both simultaneously. I thought if you could change the chamber shape dynamically during the combustion cycle, you could achieve both. The problem was making it mechanically simple enough to be reliable. He walked them through his solution, a design that used thermal expansion and carefully calibrated spring tensions to alter the effective chamber volume in real time. It sounded complex when explained, but the actual mechanism was elegant in its simplicity. No computers, no electronics, just precision engineering and physics. The judges were taking notes now. Even the skeptical corporate representative looked engaged. The result is a combustion efficiency of 92%, compared to industry standard of about 75%. Emissions are reduced by 40%, fuel consumption drops by 30%, and power output increases by 25% over comparable displacement. More slides. Test data. Graphs showing performance curves. Everything handwritten or printed from basic software because Ethan didn't have access to the expensive design programs the other presenters used. "I know this doesn't look like what you're used to seeing," Ethan said, gesturing at his makeshift presentation. "I don't have a team or a research facility or millions in funding. What I have is 3 years of work and an engine that works better than it should. That's what I'm presenting today." He finished his prepared remarks with 2 minutes to spare. The room was silent for a beat too long. Then the MIT professor spoke up. "Mr. Walker, your thermal expansion mechanism, have you tested its durability over extended operation cycles?" "Yes, ma'am. I've run the engine for over 500 hours of continuous operation without degradation. The materials are standard aerospace-grade alloys, nothing exotic, but the tolerances are tight enough that thermal fatigue hasn't been an issue." "And you machined these components yourself?" "The simpler parts, yes. The more complex pieces I had fabricated by a local machine shop. I gave them the specifications and they did the work. I can provide documentation of all outsourced manufacturing if needed." The questions continued, technical, probing, occasionally skeptical. But Ethan answered each one without hesitation, and gradually the tone shifted from interrogation to genuine interest. Then Marcus Hendricks raised his hand. The lead judge looked surprised. Corporate observers typically didn't participate in questioning, but he nodded permission. "Mr. Walker," Hendricks said, his voice carrying across the auditorium, "I have to ask a difficult question, and I apologize in advance for how it might sound. But given the sophistication of your design, given the clear parallels to research being conducted by established firms, how can you prove this is genuinely independent work and not derivative of proprietary technology you may have had access to. The room went dead silent. This wasn't a technical question. This was an accusation dressed in professional language. Ethan felt anger spike in his chest, hot and immediate, but he forced himself to stay calm, to think before responding. Losing his temper now would accomplish nothing. "I can't prove a negative," he said evenly. "I can't prove I didn't steal something any more than you can prove you didn't steal the suit you're wearing. What I can do is provide complete documentation of my development process, including dated notebooks, time-stamped digital files, receipts for materials purchases, testimony from the machine shop that did my fabrication work, and detailed explanations of every design decision I made. If that's not sufficient evidence, then I don't know what would be." "Documentation can be fabricated," Hendricks said. "So can accusations." Ethan's voice was still level, but there was steel underneath now. "You're implying I stole your company's research. Fine. Show me the research. Show me the patents or publications or internal documents that you claim I copied. Make it specific, because if you can't, then what you're doing isn't protecting intellectual property. You're just trying to disqualify a competitor through intimidation." Hendricks' face flushed red. "I'm trying to protect—" "That's enough." The lead judge's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Mr. Hendricks, you're here as an observer, not as part of the judging panel. If Velocity has genuine concerns about intellectual property, there are proper legal channels for raising them. This is neither the time nor the place." "But that's enough," the judge repeated, firmer this time. "Mr. Walker, thank you for your presentation. You can step down." Ethan gathered his materials with hands that weren't quite steady. Lily hopped down from her chair and took his hand as they left the stage. Walking back down the aisle, Ethan could feel the entire room watching them, could hear the whispers starting before they even reached their seats. Claire Bennett was staring at Marcus Hendricks with an expression that could have stripped paint. Whatever she was thinking, it wasn't positive. The final two presentations happened in something of a blur. Ethan barely registered them. His mind was still circling Hendricks' public accusation, the implications of it, the way it would color everything that happened from here forward. Even if the judges believed him, and he thought they did, the seed of doubt had been planted. People would wonder, questions would follow him. When all 5 presentations were finished, the lead judge announced that the panel would deliberate for 30 minutes before announcing results. The audience was invited to wait in the lobby or visit the exhibition hall. Ethan stayed in his seat. Lily leaned against his shoulder, unusually quiet. "That man was mean," she said finally. "Yeah. Why did he say those things?" "Because he's scared I might have built something better than what his company can make." She thought about this. That's a dumb reason to be mean. Most reasons for being mean are dumb. They sat together in the slowly emptying auditorium, waiting. Other finalists were networking in the aisles, shaking hands with industry contacts, clearly comfortable in this environment. Ethan felt completely out of place. This wasn't his world. These weren't his people. "Mr. Walker." He looked up to find Claire Bennett standing in the aisle beside their row. Up close, she looked tired in a way her makeup couldn't quite hide. The careful confidence from earlier had developed cracks. "Ms. Bennett," Ethan said neutrally, can we talk? Privately?" Ethan glanced at Lily, who was watching Claire with open suspicion. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please, just 5 minutes. There's a conference room down the hall that should be empty." Something in her tone made him reconsider. This wasn't the imperious CEO from yesterday morning. This was someone who looked genuinely unsettled. "Lily, can you stay here for a few minutes? Don't leave this seat." "Is she going to be mean to you again?" "I don't know yet." Claire flinched slightly at that, but didn't argue. Ethan followed her out of the auditorium and down a side corridor to a small conference room. She closed the door behind them, but didn't sit. "I need to apologize," she said without preamble, "for yesterday, for what I said about your car and your daughter and all of it. I was wrong." Ethan waited. There was clearly more coming. "I watched your presentation," Claire continued, "and I watched you answer those questions, and I realized I have no idea who you are, but you're not a fraud. You actually built that engine, and it's—" She paused, searching for words. "It's extraordinary." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I don't deserve it." She ran a hand through her hair, disturbing the careful styling. "Marcus shouldn't have said what he said up there. I didn't authorize that. I didn't even know he was planning it until he opened his mouth. But you knew he was going to try something. Claire met his eyes. Yes. He came to me last night with concerns about intellectual property. I told him we needed to verify his claims before making any accusations. He clearly decided to skip that step. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want you to think that was my idea. And because, she hesitated, because I'm trying to figure out if I'm someone who would rather win by destroying a competitor than by building something better. And I really don't like the answer I'm coming up with. The honesty caught Ethan off guard. He had expected corporate doublespeak, not genuine introspection. Your engine, Claire said. It's better than anything Velocity has in development. Better than anything anyone here has in development, probably. If you win today, every manufacturer in the country is going to want it. They're going to offer you money, partnerships, positions. And some of them are going to try to steal it, or bury it, or tie you up in legal knots until you give up. I'm aware. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you look like a talented engineer who has no idea how brutal this industry can be. You think building a better product is enough? It's not. Politics matter. Connections matter. Legal protection matters. And you have none of those things. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. So what are you suggesting? That I give up? Sell out to whoever offers the most money? I'm suggesting you be smart about what comes next. Claire's voice softened slightly. Look, I'm not going to pretend I'm doing this out of pure altruism. If you win today, you become my competitor whether you want to or not. But I'd rather compete against you fairly than watch you get destroyed by people with fewer scruples than I have. That's a low bar. She smiled without humor. Yeah, it really is. They stood in silence for a moment. Through the closed door, Ethan could hear the muffled sounds of the convention center, announcements over the PA, conversations in the hallway, the constant background noise of hundreds of people in motion. I should get back to my daughter, he said finally. Of course. Claire moved toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, I hope you win. You deserve it more than the rest of us. She left before Ethan could respond, leaving him alone in the conference room wondering what exactly had just happened. When he returned to the auditorium, Lily was exactly where he'd left her, swinging her legs and humming to herself. She looked up when he sat down. Did she say sorry? Yeah, she did. Do you believe her? Ethan thought about Claire's expression, the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she'd looked when she admitted she didn't like the person she was becoming. I think so. Okay. Lily went back to humming, apparently satisfied. At precisely 10:30, the judges returned to the stage. The audience filed back in quickly, sensing the announcement was imminent. The energy in the room had shifted, anticipation mixed with tension, everyone aware that what happened next would ripple through the industry for months to come. The lead judge took the microphone. Thank you all for your patience. The judging panel has reached a decision. Ethan's heart was hammering. He forced himself to breathe slowly, evenly. Lily grabbed his hand. Before we announce the winner, I want to address something that happened during the presentations. This competition is about innovation, engineering excellence, and pushing the boundaries of what's possible. It is not about corporate politics or personal attacks. Any further behavior like what we witnessed earlier will result in immediate disqualification and potential legal action. The judge paused, letting that sink in. Marcus Hendricks, sitting several rows ahead, looked like he wanted to disappear. Now, the judges were unanimous in our decision, which frankly doesn't happen often. The winner of this year's Detroit International Automotive Innovation Summit in the innovation category is Ethan Walker for his independent development of an advanced combustion efficiency system. The words registered in pieces. Winner, unanimous. Ethan Walker. The auditorium erupted. Some of the applause was genuine, engineers appreciating good work regardless of who did it. Some was polite, and some people weren't clapping at all, including several corporate representatives who looked like they'd just watched their stock price tank. Lily was jumping up and down, hugging him hard enough to make breathing difficult. We won! Daddy, we won! Yeah, Ethan managed. Yeah, we did. The judges were calling him back to the stage. Ethan walked down the aisle in a daze, Lily still holding his hand. People were congratulating him, shaking his hand, asking for business cards he didn't have. The noise was overwhelming. On stage, the lead judge shook his hand formally. Congratulations, Mr. Walker. Genuinely impressive work. Thank you, sir. Robert Chen, the older judge, pulled him aside while photographers took pictures. Remember what I said. Lawyer. Today. Don't sign anything until you have proper representation. I won't. And expect calls, lots of them. Everyone's going to want a piece of what you built. Be very, very careful about who you trust. The award ceremony wrapped up quickly after that. Ethan was given a plaque and a check for $25,000. The prize money he hadn't even been thinking about. $25,000. Enough to pay off the remaining medical debt. Enough to fix the Dodge properly if he wanted. Enough to breathe a little easier for the first time in 3 years. As the crowd dispersed, Ethan found himself surrounded by people wanting to talk business. Representatives from manufacturing firms, technology investors, licensing agents. They pressed business cards into his hands, asked for meetings, made vague promises about opportunities. It was dizzying and exhausting and slightly terrifying. Through the chaos, he caught a glimpse of Claire Bennett leaving through a side exit. She looked back once, caught his eye, and nodded. Then she was gone. Marcus Hendricks was nowhere to be seen. By the time Ethan and Lily made it back to the parking area, it was nearly noon. Ethan's phone was blowing up with calls from numbers he didn't recognize. Reporters, probably. Maybe lawyers. He turned it off and focused on getting Lily something to eat. They found a quiet corner of the convention center cafeteria and split a sandwich. Lily was still buzzing with excitement, talking rapid fire about the ceremony and the cameras and how many people had wanted to talk to her daddy. Ethan let her talk, grateful for her happiness, trying not to think too hard about what came next. Robert Chen's friend, the intellectual property lawyer. That was the first call he needed to make. Then, he needed to figure out what to do with an engine that could change the industry and a life that had just become infinitely more complicated than the quiet existence he'd been protecting for 3 years. But first, he needed to take his daughter home, make sure she was safe, make sure nothing about this disrupted the fragile stability they'd built together. Daddy! Lily was looking at him seriously now, her excitement fading into something more thoughtful. Is everything going to be different now? Ethan pulled her close. I don't know, sweetheart, maybe. Is that scary? Yeah, a little. She nodded against his chest. It's okay to be scared. Mama said that too. The mention of Sarah hit him the way it always did, sudden and sharp and impossible to prepare for. But this time, it didn't just hurt. It felt like permission. Permission to be uncertain, permission to not have all the answers, permission to build something extraordinary and be terrified about what it meant. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. She did say that. They finished their lunch in comfortable silence. Outside the cafeteria windows, Ethan could see the Dodge waiting in the parking area, still rusted and broken-looking on the outside, still extraordinary underneath. Just like him, he supposed, just like the life they were about to step into, ready or not. The drive back to the hotel should have felt triumphant. Instead, Ethan spent most of it checking his rear-view mirror, half expecting to see corporate lawyers following them. The prize check sat in his glove compartment like a live grenade. $25,000. More money than he'd seen in one place since before Sarah got sick. Should have felt like relief. Mostly it just felt like a timer had started on something he didn't fully understand yet. Lily fell asleep before they even left the convention center parking lot, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the morning. Ethan drove in silence, the Dodge's engine humming with that perfect smoothness that still caught him off guard sometimes. 3 years of work, and it still surprised him that it actually functioned the way he'd designed it to. His phone turned back on, immediately started buzzing with notifications. 17 missed calls, 32 text messages, 6 voicemails. Ethan pulled over at a gas station 2 blocks from the hotel and scrolled through them while Lily slept. Most were from numbers he didn't recognize. Reporters asking for interviews, someone claiming to be from a venture capital firm. 3 different patent lawyers offering their services. 1 message from his supervisor at the maintenance plant asking if the rumors were true, if Ethan had really won some big engineering competition. And 1 from Claire Bennett. Mr. Walker, this is Claire. I know we didn't part on the best terms yesterday, and this morning was complicated, but I meant what I said about wanting to talk. If you're willing, I'd like to meet tomorrow morning before you leave Detroit. No pressure, no corporate games, just a conversation. My number is below if you're interested. Ethan stared at the message for a long time. Every instinct told him to delete it, to stay as far away from Velocity Automotive and its CEO as possible. But something about the tone stopped him. This wasn't the confident executive from yesterday morning, or even the apologetic version from this morning's private conversation. This was someone who sounded almost uncertain. He saved the message without responding and drove the rest of the way to the hotel. Getting Lily inside and settled took priority over everything else. She woke up enough to brush her teeth and change into pajamas, then collapsed back into bed without even asking about dinner. Ethan sat beside her until her breathing evened out into real sleep, then moved back to the desk by the window. Robert Chen's business card sat next to his laptop. The lawyer's name was printed in simple text: Jennifer Torres, Intellectual Property Law. Ethan pulled out his phone and stared at the number for a full minute before dialing. She answered on the second ring. Torres. Miss Torres, my name is Ethan Walker. Robert Chen gave me your number. He said you might be able to help me with the combustion engine. I know, Robert called me this afternoon. Her voice was brisk but not unkind. Congratulations on your win. I watched the presentation online. Impressive work. Thank you. Robert said you built this completely independently. No corporate backing, no university affiliation, no team. Is that accurate? Yes. And you have documentation proving that? Dated notebooks, receipts, time-stamped files? Everything. I've been keeping records since the beginning. Good. That's very good. Ethan heard papers rustling in the background. Here's the situation, Mr. Walker. You just won one of the most prestigious automotive engineering competitions in North America with technology that could legitimately disrupt a multi-billion-dollar industry. That makes you valuable. And being valuable without protection makes you vulnerable. I'm getting that impression. I'm sure you are. So let me be direct. You need legal representation immediately. Before you talk to any manufacturers, before you sign anything, before you even discuss licensing terms with anyone. The calls you're getting right now, half of them are from people who want to help you. The other half are from people who want to own you. And you won't be able to tell the difference without someone who knows what to look for. Ethan rubbed his eyes. The exhaustion from the past 2 days was catching up with him. What would hiring you involve? Initial consultation is free. If you want to retain me, my rate is $300 an hour. I know that's expensive, but intellectual property law is specialized work, and what you've built is valuable enough that cutting corners on legal protection would be a mistake. $300 an hour. Ethan did the mental math and felt his stomach drop. Even with the prize money, he couldn't afford extended legal representation at that rate. Torres seemed to sense his hesitation. Mr. Walker, I'm not trying to scare you, but I've seen situations like this before. Talented people who build something extraordinary and then get eaten alive by corporations with unlimited legal resources and no scruples about using them. I don't want that to happen to you. I appreciate that, but I need to think about it. Fair enough. Think about it tonight. Call me tomorrow if you decide you want to move forward. In the meantime, my free advice is this. Don't sign anything, don't verbally agree to anything, and don't share technical details with anyone who hasn't signed a non-disclosure agreement. Understood? Understood. Good. And Mr. Walker, get some sleep. You look like you need it. Ethan almost asked how she knew what he looked like, then realized she'd probably watched the entire presentation online. Of course she had. Everyone had. Apparently. After hanging up, he sat at the desk and tried to process everything. The win, the calls, the legal complications he was just beginning to understand. Claire Bennett's message sitting unanswered on his phone. His laptop sat open in front of him, screen dark. On impulse, Ethan woke it up and typed Claire Bennett's name into a search engine. The results were extensive. Articles about her rise in the automotive industry, profiles in business magazines, interviews about being a young female CEO in a male-dominated field, photos from industry events, always perfectly composed, always projecting confidence. Ethan clicked on a profile from a business magazine published 6 months ago. The article painted her as a brilliant strategist who had taken a struggling automotive parts manufacturer and turned it into one of the fastest-growing companies in the sector. But buried in the middle of the piece was a paragraph that caught his attention. Bennett's drive, colleagues say, comes from a deep-seated need to prove herself. As the daughter of a factory worker who died in an industrial accident when she was 15, she built her success from nothing. Claire doesn't just want to win, says a former executive who worked with her early in her career. She needs to win. It's not about money or prestige. It's about proving she's not disposable the way the world treated her father. Gitbe Oshra. Ethan read that paragraph 3 times. It didn't excuse yesterday's mockery or Marcus Hendricks' accusations, but it provided context. Claire Bennett wasn't just a ruthless CEO protecting her empire. She was someone fighting the same battle he was, just from a different position. He closed the laptop and checked on Lily one more time. She was deeply asleep, curled under the blankets with her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. Safe. Protected. Completely unaware of how complicated her father's life had just become. Ethan's phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. He almost ignored it, then saw it was from a Michigan number he didn't recognize. Against his better judgment, he listened. Mr. Walker, this is David Cho from Great Lakes Manufacturing. I attended your presentation this morning, and I have to tell you, what you've built is remarkable. I'd like to discuss a potential partnership. We're a mid-sized firm, family-owned, and we specialize in bringing innovative automotive technology to market. Unlike the big corporations, we actually care about preserving the integrity of original designs rather than just acquiring patents to bury them. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. I think we could do something really special together. The message ended with a phone number. Ethan saved it without calling back. Torres's advice echoed in his head. Don't sign anything. Don't verbally agree to anything. He tried to sleep and failed. His mind wouldn't stop running through scenarios, calculations, possibilities. What if he licensed the engine design? What if he tried to manufacture it himself? What if he sold it outright and used the money to disappear into a quiet life somewhere far from Detroit? What if he just made the biggest mistake of his life by winning? At 2 in the morning, Ethan gave up on sleep and did what he always did when his brain wouldn't shut off. He pulled out his engineering notebooks and started reviewing his work. 3 years of calculations, sketches, failed prototypes, incremental improvements. Every page represented nights when grief had threatened to swallow him whole, and the only thing that kept him functional was having a problem to solve. Looking at those pages now, he realized something he hadn't fully articulated before. This engine wasn't just about innovation or competition or proving himself. It was about Sarah. It was the promise he'd made to himself at her funeral, standing there with Lily's small hand in his, that he wouldn't let her death break him completely, that he'd find a way to keep going, keep building, keep being the father their daughter needed. And now he'd succeeded, and success was somehow more terrifying than failure had ever been. The next morning came too early. Lily woke up at 6:30, immediately asking if they were going home today. Ethan had originally planned to leave right after the finals, but the avalanche of messages and Torres's advice had changed his thinking. They had the hotel room for one more night. Maybe staying in Detroit another day, getting some clarity on what came next, would be smarter than rushing back. Maybe tomorrow, he told Lily. I need to take care of some things first. What things? Grown-up things. Boring stuff. She accepted this with the easy trust of a 6-year-old. They had breakfast in the hotel lobby, mediocre coffee for him, chocolate milk and a muffin for her, and Ethan tried to figure out his next move. Claire Bennett's message kept nagging at him. He should ignore it. Getting involved with Velocity in any capacity seemed like inviting disaster. But the conversation yesterday, the genuine apology, the exhaustion in her eyes when she'd admitted she didn't like who she was becoming, that had felt real. And despite everything, he was curious. At 8 o'clock, Ethan pulled up Claire's message and typed a response. Miss Bennett, I can meet this morning, 10 o'clock. Somewhere public. You pick the place. The response came back in less than a minute. There's a coffee shop on West Grand Boulevard called Maddie's. Good coffee, quiet enough to talk. I'll be there at 10. Ethan confirmed and immediately felt like he'd made a mistake. But it was done now. He spent the next hour trying to keep Lily entertained in the hotel room, which was increasingly difficult. She was restless, bored, clearly ready to go home to familiar surroundings. Ethan turned on the television and let her watch cartoons while he reviewed his engineering documents one more time, preparing for whatever conversation was about to happen. At 9:30, he called Mrs. Chen, their neighbor back home. Ethan, I saw the news online. You won. I can't believe it. Yeah, it's been kind of overwhelming. I bet. When are you coming home? Tomorrow, probably. Maybe tonight. I'm not sure yet. Take your time. Everything's fine here. Your plants are still alive, if barely. Ethan smiled despite his anxiety. Thanks for checking on things. Of course. And Ethan, Sarah would be so proud of you. You know that, right? The words hit harder than expected. Yeah, thanks. After hanging up, he got Lily ready and they drove to Maddie's. The coffee shop was exactly as advertised. Small, clean, tucked into a quiet street away from the main convention center area. Ethan found parking and turned to Lily. I need you to be really good for the next hour, okay? This is an important meeting. With the mean lady? She wasn't mean yesterday. She apologized, remember? Lily looked skeptical but nodded. Okay, but if she's mean today, I'm going to tell her. Fair enough. They went inside. The shop was quiet on a Wednesday morning, just a few people working on laptops and one older couple reading newspapers. And there, at a corner table away from the windows, was Claire Bennett. She looked different again. No corporate armor today, just jeans, a plain sweater, minimal makeup. She looked younger without all the professional styling, more human. She stood when she saw them approaching, and Ethan noticed she'd already ordered. 2 coffees sat on the table along with a hot chocolate and what looked like a cookie. I didn't know what your daughter would like, Claire said, gesturing at the hot chocolate. I took a guess. That's perfect, Ethan said, surprised. Thank you. They sat down in awkward silence. Lily grabbed the cookie without asking and started eating it while watching Claire with open curiosity. So, Claire said finally, I'm sure you're wondering why I wanted to meet. Little bit. She smiled without much humor. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure myself. After yesterday, after watching Marcus pull that stunt during your presentation, after seeing how I've been handling this whole situation. She paused. I couldn't sleep last night. I kept thinking about what you said when I tried to get you to leave before the competition. About actually working being more important than looking pretty. You remembered that? I remember most things people say to me. Occupational habit. Claire wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. The thing is, you were right. Velocity's entire business model is built on looking innovative without necessarily being innovative. We acquire promising technology, polish it, market it aggressively, and beat competitors through superior positioning rather than superior engineering. We're very good at it, but we're not actually building anything new. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he stayed quiet. And then you show up, Claire continued, with an engine you built alone in a garage that's legitimately better than anything my entire R&D department has produced in 5 years. And my first instinct wasn't to be impressed. It was to feel threatened, to find a way to discredit you or acquire your work before anyone realized how much better it was. Is that what this meeting is about, making an offer? No. She said it firmly. I mean, yes, eventually I'd like to discuss some kind of partnership or licensing arrangement, but that's not why I asked you here. I asked you here because I wanted to apologize properly, not just for mocking you, but for the entire system that made you feel like you had to prove yourself to people like me in the first place. Lily was watching this exchange like it was a tennis match, her head turning between them with each comment. I don't understand, Ethan said. Claire pulled something from her bag, a worn manila folder. She set it on the table and opened it, revealing what looked like handwritten engineering notes. But the handwriting wasn't hers. This was my father's, she said quietly. James Bennett. He worked at a parts manufacturing plant for 23 years. Never finished high school, but he was one of those people who could fix anything, understand how any machine worked just by looking at it. He had notebooks full of ideas for improvements to the production line. Better safety mechanisms, more efficient processes, innovations that could have saved the company money and protected workers. She touched the pages carefully, like they were fragile. He tried to show them to management multiple times. They ignored him, told him his job was to work the line, not redesign it. A few even mocked him for thinking a factory worker could understand engineering better than college-educated managers. Ethan was starting to understand where this was going. When I was 15, there was an accident on the line. A safety mechanism failed, the exact same mechanism my father had tried to fix years earlier. The machine caught his arm and... She stopped, swallowed. He died 3 days later from complications, and the company's official response was that he'd violated safety protocols, that it was his fault. I'm sorry, Ethan said quietly. I spent the next 15 years building Velocity specifically to prove that people like my father, people with actual talent and practical knowledge, weren't disposable. That innovation could come from anywhere, not just expensive universities and corporate research labs. But somewhere along the way, I became exactly what I was fighting against. I started judging people by appearances, by whether they fit the profile of what success is supposed to look like. I saw you get out of that rusted car with your daughter, and I assumed you were nobody, just like those managers assumed my father was nobody. She closed the folder carefully. So when I say I'm sorry, I'm not just apologizing for yesterday morning. I'm apologizing for becoming the kind of person who would have dismissed my own father if he'd shown up at my company with a brilliant idea. The coffee shop felt very quiet. Even Lily had stopped eating her cookie. Why are you telling me this? Ethan asked. Because I want you to understand that when I eventually make you an offer, and I will make you an offer, because that engine is too important to ignore, it won't be coming from a place of wanting to acquire your work and bury it. It'll be coming from someone who genuinely believes people like you and my father are the real innovators, and that protecting your invention while helping it reach the market is the right thing to do. Ethan studied her face, looking for deception or manipulation. All he saw was exhaustion and something that looked like genuine regret. I need to be honest with you, he said. I don't trust easily, especially not corporations or executives or anyone who has more power in this situation than I do. Yesterday you mocked my car and implied I was wasting everyone's time. Today you're telling me about your father and talking about partnerships. I want to believe you're being sincere, but I've got a daughter to protect and an invention that could change our lives, and I can't afford to make the wrong call here. That's fair, Claire said. More than fair, actually. If I were in your position, I wouldn't trust me either. So what do you want from me? Nothing right now, just this conversation. Just the chance to be honest about where I'm coming from. She pulled out another piece of paper, this time a business card. This is my direct number, not my assistant, not my office line. Me. When you're ready to talk business, call that number. I'll meet you anywhere you want, with whatever legal representation you want present, and we'll discuss terms. And if you decide you don't want to work with Velocity at all, that's fine too. I won't make it difficult. I won't send lawyers after you or try to tie you up in legal knots. You have my word on that. Ethan took the card but didn't commit to anything. I'm talking to a patent lawyer today, getting legal representation before I make any decisions. Smart. That's very smart. Claire finished her coffee and stood. I should let you go. I'm sure you have a lot to figure out. Yeah. She looked down at Lily, who was still watching her warily. I'm sorry for being mean to your dad. He seems like a really good person, and he built something amazing. You should be proud of him. Lily considered this seriously. I am proud, but you were still mean. Claire smiled, and this time it looked genuine. You're absolutely right, I was. I'll try to do better. After she left, Ethan and Lily sat in silence for a minute. The hot chocolate was getting cold, but Lily was still working on the cookie. Do you believe her? Lily asked finally. I don't know yet, Ethan admitted, but I think maybe she was telling the truth. About her daddy? Yeah. That's sad. It is. They finished their drinks and headed back to the hotel. Ethan spent the rest of the morning returning phone calls, sorting through offers and interview requests, trying to build a picture of what his options actually were. Most of it was overwhelming. A few conversations were genuinely interesting. And one call, from David Cho at Great Lakes Manufacturing, left him thinking that maybe not everyone in this industry was trying to exploit him. At 2 o'clock, Ethan called Jennifer Torres back. Mr. Walker, I was hoping I'd hear from you. I want to hire you if the offer's still open. It is, and I think that's a very wise decision. Papers rustled in the background again. I've already started preliminary research on your engine patent situation. The good news is, from what I can tell based on public records, there's no existing patent that covers your specific combustion chamber design. The less good news is that filing for patent protection is expensive and time-consuming, and you're going to have multiple corporations racing to either license your technology or find ways to work around it. How expensive? For a patent this complex? Probably $15,000 to $20,000, and that's if everything goes smoothly. More if anyone challenges the application. Ethan's stomach sank. I don't have that kind of money. I mean, I have the prize money, but you need it for other things. I understand. Torres paused. There might be another option. Some law firms, including mine, work on contingency for particularly promising intellectual property cases. Basically, we cover the upfront costs in exchange for a percentage of future licensing revenue. It's riskier for us, but it means you don't have to pay out of pocket unless your engine actually generates income. What percentage? Typically 15 to 20% of gross licensing fees for the first 5 years. After that, the patent is yours free and clear. Ethan did the math. If he licensed the engine and it generated significant revenue, 15% would be substantial. But if the alternative was not being able to protect his work at all, it was still better than nothing. What do you think I should do? Honestly, I think your engine has enough commercial potential that a contingency arrangement makes sense for both of us. But I also think you should get multiple opinions. Talk to other IP lawyers. Make sure you're comfortable with whoever you choose to represent you. I don't have time to interview a dozen lawyers. People are already calling with offers. I need protection now. Torres was quiet for a moment. All right, here's what I propose. Let me draft a basic non-disclosure agreement and a letter of representation. That gives you immediate protection and establishes that you have legal counsel. Then we'll work out the details of our arrangement over the next week. If at any point you're not comfortable with how things are going, you can terminate our agreement with 30 days' notice. Fair? Fair. Good. I'll have documents ready for you to review by tomorrow morning. In the meantime, keep not signing anything or sharing technical details. After hanging up, Ethan felt marginally better. At least he had someone in his corner who understood the legal landscape. But the underlying anxiety remained. This wasn't just about protecting an engine anymore. This was about navigating a world he didn't understand, making decisions that could affect his and Lily's entire future, trying not to get swallowed whole by forces much larger than himself. His phone rang again. This time it was a number he recognized, Robert Chen. Mr. Walker, I hope I'm not bothering you. Not at all. What can I do for you? I wanted to check in, see if you'd connected with Jennifer Torres. She's one of the best in the business. I did. We're moving forward with representation. Excellent. That's excellent. Chen sounded genuinely pleased. The other reason I'm calling is I wanted to give you some advice, engineer to engineer. You're about to get a lot of attention. Some of it will be positive, some will be people trying to take advantage of you, and some will be corporate interests genuinely threatened by what you've built. I'm starting to figure that out. I'm sure you are. But here's the thing most people don't tell you. The technology itself, as brilliant as your engine is only part of the equation. The other part is understanding what you actually want to accomplish, because that will determine which offers you take seriously and which ones you walk away from. What do you mean? Do you want to get rich? License your design to the highest bidder and cash out? Do you want to see your invention actually make it to market? Then you need a partner with manufacturing capability and distribution networks. Do you want to maintain control over your work? Then you need to be very careful about the terms of any agreement you sign. All of those are legitimate goals, but they require different strategies. Ethan hadn't thought about it in those terms. I don't know what I want. I just built an engine. I didn't plan for any of this. I know, and that's okay, but you need to figure it out soon because people are going to start making you offers with very specific terms, and you won't be able to evaluate them properly unless you know what your priorities are. They talked for another 20 minutes. Chen walked Ethan through different licensing models, explained the pros and cons of exclusive versus non-exclusive agreements, outlined what manufacturing partnerships typically looked like. It was dense information, and Ethan's head was spinning by the end, but it helped him start to see the shape of his options. After that call ended, Ethan sat down with his notebook and tried to answer Chen's question. What did he actually want? He wanted Lily to be secure. That was non-negotiable. Whatever he did, it couldn't disrupt her life so completely that she lost the stability she needed. He wanted Sarah's memory honored. The engine was his promise to her, his way of proving that her death hadn't destroyed him. Selling it off to be buried or watching it get twisted into something unrecognizable would feel like breaking that promise. He wanted to matter. That was the hardest one to admit, but it was true. He wanted proof that his life amounted to something more than just surviving. That the years of midnight work and grinding poverty and endless grief had led somewhere meaningful. Beyond that, he honestly didn't know. Getting rich sounded nice in theory, but didn't feel like a real priority. Control over his invention mattered, but he was realistic enough to know that bringing complex technology to market required resources he didn't have. Pride was important, but not important enough to sabotage opportunities out of stubbornness. It was messy and complicated, and he didn't have clear answers, which probably meant he was thinking about it correctly. That evening, Ethan took Lily to a better restaurant than they could normally afford. They sat in a booth by the window and ordered real food, not drive-through or gas station sandwiches. Lily got chicken fingers and fries and ate them with the focused determination of someone who knew this was a special occasion. "Are we celebrating?" she asked through a mouthful of chicken. "Yeah, I think we are." "What happens now?" "I don't know exactly, but things are going to change. Probably a lot." She thought about this while stealing one of his fries. "Will we still live in our apartment?" "For now. Maybe eventually we can get somewhere better." "I like our apartment." "Me too. But wouldn't you like having your own room, not having to share with all my tools and engine parts?" She shrugged. "I guess, but only if we can bring Mr. Chen with us." "Mrs. Chen or the stuffed rabbit?" "Both," Ethan smiled. "Deal." They finished dinner and drove back to the hotel. Tomorrow, they'd go home. Tomorrow, the real work of figuring out what came next would begin. But tonight, Ethan let himself just be a father having dinner with his daughter, celebrating something they'd accomplished together, even if she didn't fully understand what it meant. His phone buzzed one more time before bed. A message from Claire Bennett. "I meant what I said this morning. When you're ready to talk, I'm ready to listen. No pressure, no games, just an honest conversation about how we might work together. Take care of yourself and your daughter." Ethan saved the message and set his phone aside. He still didn't entirely trust Claire Bennett, but he was starting to think that maybe he didn't have to trust her completely to work with her. Maybe trust was something you built incrementally through actions and follow-through, not something that existed or didn't exist in binary terms. And maybe that was okay. Maybe navigating this new reality meant learning to work with people whose motivations were complicated, whose pasts were messy, whose present actions were trying to be better than their previous ones. The world wasn't divided into purely good and purely evil people. It was full of humans trying to do right while carrying their own damage and fighting their own battles. Claire Bennett was one of those humans. So was Marcus Hendricks, probably, even if his damage manifested in uglier ways. So was Ethan himself, still carrying grief and fear 3 years after Sarah's death, still trying to figure out how to be both a good father and a person with his own ambitions. Before turning out the lights, Ethan pulled out his phone one more time and opened the photo album. Sarah smiled back at him from the screen, frozen in a moment from 4 years ago, before the cancer diagnosis, before everything changed. He hadn't looked at these pictures in months. It hurt too much, usually. But tonight, it felt right. Like she was there with him, seeing what he'd accomplished, knowing he'd kept his promise. "I did it," he whispered to the empty hotel room. "I don't know what comes next, but I did it." Lily was already asleep. Ethan sat in the chair by the window, watching the Detroit skyline and trying to imagine their future. It was vast and uncertain and terrifying. But for the first time in 3 years, it also felt like it might be something more than just survival. It might actually be a life. Morning came with the sound of Ethan's phone ringing at 7:30. He'd been awake for an hour already, staring at the ceiling and running through scenarios he couldn't control. The caller ID showed Jennifer Torres. "Good morning, Mr. Walker. I hope I'm not calling too early." "I was up already." "Good. I wanted to catch you before things got chaotic. I've been monitoring industry channels since yesterday, and you're generating significant buzz. Several major publications are running stories about your win. Social media is picking it up, and I've already fielded 3 calls from corporate attorneys asking if you have representation." Ethan sat up, careful not to wake Lily. "What did you tell them?" "That you do, and all communications need to go through me. I've also drafted those documents I mentioned, NDA and letter of representation. I'm sending them to your email now. Review them when you can, sign electronically, and send them back. That gives us a legal framework to operate from." "Okay, I can do that." "One more thing. You should know that Velocity Automotive issued a press statement this morning." Ethan's stomach tightened. "What kind of statement?" "Let me read it to you. Velocity Automotive congratulates Ethan Walker on his innovative combustion engine design and his well-deserved victory at the Detroit International Automotive Innovation Summit. While preliminary analysis suggested potential similarities to Velocity's proprietary research, further review has confirmed that Mr. Walker's work is genuinely independent and represents a significant contribution to the field. Velocity looks forward to potential collaboration opportunities as this technology develops. The relief was immediate and physical. They're backing off? Appears so. This is Claire Bennett doing damage control, probably. That accusation from her research director was bad press for everyone involved. This statement tries to walk it back without admitting they were wrong. Does this mean I'm safe from legal action? From Velocity? Probably. But this is going to attract attention from other companies who might have their own concerns about IP protection. The patent filing becomes even more critical now. Can you meet me at my office this afternoon? We should go through the application process in detail. They set a time for 2 o'clock. After hanging up, Ethan found the email Torres had sent and read through the documents carefully. The language was dense but clear, standard legal protection establishing attorney-client privilege and outlining the terms of their working relationship. He signed both electronically and sent them back. Lily woke up asking when they were going home. Ethan promised her they'd leave Detroit by evening, after he handled a few final meetings. She accepted this with visible reluctance, already tired of hotel rooms and unfamiliar places. They checked out at 9 and loaded their bags into the Dodge. Ethan had the morning free before his meeting with Torres, and he spent it driving aimlessly around Detroit with Lily, showing her the parts of the city that weren't convention centers and corporate headquarters. Old neighborhoods where he'd grown up. The library where he'd spent countless hours reading engineering textbooks after Sarah died. The diner where they used to go for breakfast on weekends when money was less tight. "Why are we looking at old places?" Lily asked. "Just remembering, I guess. Things are going to be different now. Wanted to see where we came from before we figure out where we're going." She seemed satisfied with that explanation and went back to watching the city pass by her window. At noon, they stopped for lunch at a small restaurant Ethan remembered from years ago. The food was better than he expected and cheaper than the tourist places near the convention center. They sat in a booth that had probably been there since the 70s, eating sandwiches and not talking much. Comfortable silence that came from knowing each other well enough that conversation wasn't always necessary. Ethan's phone had been buzzing constantly all morning. More interview requests. More business inquiries. A surprising number of messages from people claiming to be old friends or distant relatives, suddenly interested in reconnecting. He ignored most of it, responding only to the few that seemed genuinely legitimate. One message caught his attention. It was from David Cho at Great Lakes Manufacturing, following up on his voicemail from yesterday. "Mr. Walker, I understand you're likely overwhelmed with offers right now. I wanted to reiterate that Great Lakes is genuinely interested in working with you in a way that respects your vision and protects your ownership. We're a smaller operation than companies like Velocity, but that means we can be more flexible and more fair in our partnerships. I'd love to set up a meeting to discuss possibilities. No pressure, no obligation. Just a conversation between engineers who care about good work." Something about the tone felt different from the other corporate inquiries. Less aggressive, more genuine. Ethan saved the message to follow up on later. At 1:30, they drove to Jennifer Torres's office. It was located in a modest building downtown, far from the gleaming corporate towers that housed the major automotive firms. The lobby was clean but worn, and the elevator made concerning noises on the way up to the 3rd floor. Torres's office itself was small but organized. Law books lined one wall. A desk covered in files and legal pads dominated the space. The woman who stood to greet them was younger than Ethan expected, maybe late 30s with sharp eyes and a handshake that meant business. "Mr. Walker, good to finally meet in person." She looked down at Lily. "And you must be Lily. Your dad talks about you a lot." "We talked once," Ethan said. "Yes, but you mentioned her at least 6 times. That counts." Torres gestured to chairs. "Please sit. We have a lot to cover." She had prepared a detailed breakdown of the patent filing process, complete with timelines and cost estimates. Looking at the documents spread across her desk, Ethan felt the weight of what he was stepping into. "The most important thing to understand," Torres explained, "is that filing a patent doesn't give you immediate protection. The application process can take years. During that time, your invention is vulnerable. Anyone can see what you're trying to patent and potentially develop workarounds or file competing claims. So what do I do? You move fast. We file the patent application immediately. We also file for provisional protection, which gives you some coverage while the full patent is being processed. And critically, you don't share detailed technical specifications with anyone who hasn't signed an ironclad NDA. That means even potential partners don't get full access until agreements are in place. Lily was getting restless, swinging her legs and looking around the office with visible boredom. Torres noticed and pulled open a desk drawer. I keep toys for situations like this. My sister has 3 kids and they visit sometimes. She produced a small box of colored pencils and paper. Think you can draw me a picture while your dad and I talk boring lawyer stuff? Lily accepted the supplies and immediately started drawing, apparently satisfied. For the next hour, Torres walked Ethan through every aspect of protecting his intellectual property. She explained the difference between design patents and utility patents. She outlined strategies for dealing with potential infringement. She discussed licensing models and royalty structures and all the complex machinery that turned an invention into actual income. Ethan's head was swimming by the end of it. This is more complicated than building the engine was. That's because engineering has clear rules, Torres said. Law is just people arguing about what words mean. But the good news is, you don't have to understand all of it. That's what you're paying me for. You focus on the engineering. I'll focus on making sure nobody screws you over legally. What about the cost? You said $15,000 to $20,000 for the patent filing. I have $25,000 in prize money, but that's supposed to be for paying off medical debt and the contingency arrangement I mentioned. I've reviewed your engine design and the market potential. I'm willing to cover the upfront costs in exchange for 15% of licensing revenue for the first 5 years. After reviewing comparable technologies, I think that's fair to both of us. Ethan did the mental calculation. If the engine generated significant licensing income, 15% would be substantial. But it also meant Torres had skin in the game, an incentive to protect his interests aggressively. What if it doesn't generate much revenue? What if nobody wants to license it? Then I eat the cost. That's the risk I'm taking, but honestly, I think you're going to do very well. What you've built is legitimately revolutionary. Companies are going to want it. They spent another 30 minutes hammering out the details of their agreement. Torres explained everything in plain language, made sure Ethan understood exactly what he was agreeing to, never rushed him through sections he wanted to review more carefully. By the time they were done, Ethan felt reasonably confident he wasn't being taken advantage of. One last thing, Torres said as they were wrapping up. I've already started getting calls from potential partners wanting to discuss licensing. I'd like your permission to do preliminary screening. I can filter out the obvious bad actors and set up meetings with companies that seem legitimate. Would that be helpful? Very helpful. I don't even know how to evaluate most of these offers. That's normal. Nobody does it first. But we'll figure it out together. She glanced at the drawing Lily had been working on. Can I see what you made? Lily held up her picture proudly. It showed a stick-figure man standing next to a car that was covered in what appeared to be flowers, or possibly explosions. It was hard to tell. That's beautiful, Torres said seriously. Is that your dad? Yeah, and his engine. It's supposed to be special. It is special. Your dad is very talented. Lily beamed. Torres caught Ethan's eye and smiled, and he realized that she understood something most lawyers probably didn't, that how you treated his daughter mattered as much as the legal expertise you provided. They left the office at 4 o'clock with a plan in place. Torres would handle the patent filing and preliminary partner screening. Ethan would return home, get back to normal life as much as possible, and wait for the legal machinery to start turning. It wasn't exciting, but it felt solid, professional. Like maybe this wasn't going to be the disaster he'd feared. The drive home took 3 hours. Lily fell asleep within 30 minutes, exhausted from days of disrupted routine and unfamiliar places. Ethan drove through the late afternoon light, the Dodge running smooth and perfect, the engine that had changed everything humming beneath the hood. His phone rang as he was merging onto the highway. The caller ID showed a Detroit number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer, then decided he might as well. Mr. Walker? The voice was unfamiliar. This is Richard Ashford. I'm the executive producer for Great Lakes Technical Report. We're a documentary series that covers innovations in automotive and aerospace engineering. I attended your presentation at the summit, and I'd love to discuss featuring your engine in an upcoming episode. I'm not really interested in publicity right now, Ethan said carefully. I understand, but this wouldn't be tabloid coverage. We focus on the actual engineering, the problem-solving process, the technical innovations. Our audience is primarily other engineers and serious enthusiasts. It's the kind of exposure that builds credibility in the field rather than just generating headlines. Ethan thought about it. Torres had mentioned that credibility mattered, that being taken seriously by other engineers would help when it came to licensing negotiations. Can you send me information about the show? I'll review it and get back to you. Absolutely. Thank you for considering it. After hanging up, Ethan realized he was going to need a system for handling all these inquiries. Maybe a dedicated email address. Maybe a standard response template. Something to create distance between the constant demands for his attention and the actual work of being a father and an engineer. They arrived home at 7:30. The apartment looked exactly as they'd left it, small, cramped, filled with the accumulated debris of their lives. But it was theirs, and stepping through the door felt like finally being able to breathe properly again. Mrs. Chen came over within minutes of hearing them arrive, wanting to hear everything about the competition. She sat at their kitchen table while Ethan made tea and gave her a condensed version of the past few days. She listened with the kind attention of someone who genuinely cared, occasionally asking questions but mostly just letting him talk. Sarah would be so proud, she said when he finished. It was the second time someone had said that to him in 3 days, and it still hit like a punch to the chest. Yeah, I think she would. After Mrs. Chen left, Ethan got Lily ready for bed. She was practically falling asleep standing up, worn out from travel and excitement and too many disruptions to her normal routine. He tucked her in with her stuffed rabbit and sat beside her bed like he did every night. Daddy? Her voice was sleepy. Are we still going to be normal? What do you mean? You won that big prize and people want to talk to you about your engine. Does that mean everything has to be different? Ethan thought carefully about his answer. Some things might change. We might be able to move somewhere nicer. I might not have to work as many hours at the plant, but the important stuff, you and me, the way we are together, that stays the same. I promise. Okay, good. She was almost asleep already. I like the way we are. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. He sat there until her breathing evened into real sleep, then retreated to his own room. The garage where he'd built the engine was visible through his window, dark now, all the tools and equipment exactly as he'd left them before driving to Detroit. 3 years of work contained in that small space. 3 years of grief and determination and midnight hours when the only thing keeping him sane was having a problem to solve. And now it was done. The engine worked. People recognized its value. The struggle to prove himself was over, except it didn't feel over. It felt like he'd just traded one set of problems for a completely different set. Legal protection, licensing negotiations, media requests, corporate partnerships. All the machinery of turning an invention into something that existed in the real world, that generated income and changed industries and justified the years of sacrifice. His phone buzzed with another message. This time it was Claire Bennett. I saw Velocity's press statement. I wanted you to know that came directly from me, over Marcus's objections. He wanted to maintain the IP concerns. I told him to back off or find another job. Your work is legitimate and deserves to be treated as such. When you're ready to talk about potential collaboration, my offer still stands. No pressure. Ethan read the message twice. He still wasn't entirely sure what to make of Claire Bennett, but actions mattered more than words, and forcing her company to publicly acknowledge his work was legitimate had been an action, one that probably cost her political capital internally. He typed a response. Thank you. That statement helped. I need some time to get legal protection in place and figure out my next steps, but I'll keep your offer in mind. The response came back quickly. Take all the time you need. This isn't going anywhere. Over the next week, life developed a strange rhythm. Ethan went back to work at the plant, showing up for his maintenance supervisor shifts and trying to act like everything was normal. But it wasn't normal. Co-workers who'd barely spoken to him before suddenly wanted to know about the competition. His supervisor pulled him aside to ask if he was planning to quit now that he'd made it big. I haven't made anything big yet, Ethan told him. I won a competition and got some attention, that's all. That's not what I'm hearing. Word is every major automotive company in the country wants your engine. Word is exaggerating. But Word wasn't entirely wrong. Torres called him almost daily with updates on partnership inquiries. Great Lakes Manufacturing had submitted a formal proposal for a licensing arrangement. Two other mid-sized firms had expressed serious interest. Even some of the major manufacturers were making cautious inquiries, though Torres advised him to be very careful about those. The big companies want to acquire your technology, not partner with you, she explained. They'll offer you a lot of money up front to buy the patent outright, but that means you lose control over how it's developed and implemented. For someone like you, who built this thing from scratch and clearly cares about seeing it succeed, that's probably not the right move. So what is the right move? Probably a licensing agreement with a mid-sized manufacturer who has the resources to bring it to market, but isn't big enough to just absorb your work and forget about it. Someone who needs your engine to compete with the major players and will therefore be invested in making it successful. Like Great Lakes? Maybe. Their proposal is actually quite good. They're offering a royalty-based structure with minimum guaranteed payments, retention of your ownership rights, and a seat on their technical advisory board. That's more favorable than most offers I've seen. What's the catch? The catch is they're smaller, less manufacturing capacity, longer timeline to bring the engine to market. If you go with someone like Velocity, you'd see results faster, but you'd also have less control and probably get squeezed out of the development process entirely. Ethan thought about Claire's office, her story about her father, the exhaustion in her eyes when she admitted she'd become what she was fighting against. What if Velocity is different? What if they actually want to do right by this? Then they'll prove it through their contract terms. Talk is cheap. Legal agreements are what matter. 10 days after returning from Detroit, Ethan got a call from an unfamiliar number. He almost didn't answer. He'd been screening calls aggressively to maintain some semblance of normal life, but something made him pick up. Mr. Walker, this is Martin Hayes from the National Engineering Foundation. I'm calling because we'd like to invite you to speak at our annual innovation conference in Chicago next month. I'm not really a public speaker, Ethan said. You don't need to be. We're looking for people who have genuinely innovative work to share, not professional presenters. Your combustion engine design represents exactly the kind of independent innovation we want to highlight. The conference draws engineers from across the country, including many who work in technology commercialization. It would be excellent exposure for your work. Ethan thought about it. More exposure meant more opportunity, but it also meant more time away from Lily, more disruption to their lives. Can I think about it? Of course, but I should mention that we cover all travel expenses and provide an honorarium of $5,000 for speakers. And you'd be welcome to bring your daughter if that makes the trip easier. $5,000. That was more than Ethan made in a month at the plant. And if Lily could come, it wouldn't mean leaving her behind. Let me talk to my lawyer and get back to you. Absolutely. Take your time. After hanging up, Ethan realized that this was becoming his life now. Constant decisions about opportunities he'd never imagined having. Weighing trade-offs between exposure and privacy, between income and stability, between proving himself and protecting the quiet life he'd built with his daughter. That evening, Lily asked him if they could go back to the garage and work on something together. She missed the routine of watching him tinker with engines while she did homework or drew pictures. Ethan realized he missed it too. The simplicity of having a mechanical problem to solve instead of legal and business problems he barely understood. They spent 2 hours in the garage that night. Ethan taught Lily how to check oil levels properly, how to identify different engine components, how to read a basic schematic. She absorbed everything with the focused attention she brought to things that interested her. Watching her lean over the workbench, asking questions about how things worked, Ethan felt something settle in his chest. This was what mattered, not the competition or the prize money or the business opportunities. This, teaching his daughter, passing on knowledge, building something together in a cluttered garage while the world outside made demands he wasn't ready to meet. His phone buzzed. Jennifer Torres. Quick update. Great Lakes has revised their offer based on feedback I gave them. The royalty percentage is better, and they've added a clause guaranteeing you approval rights on any major design modifications. This is getting very close to an agreement I'd be comfortable recommending. What about Velocity? Have they made a formal offer? Not yet. Claire Bennett has requested a meeting, but they haven't put anything in writing. Do you want to meet with her before making a decision on Great Lakes? Ethan watched Lily carefully cleaning a wrench she'd been using, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. Yeah, I think I do. Set it up. Are you sure? You don't owe them anything. I know, but I want to hear what she has to say. Torres agreed to arrange a meeting for the following week. After hanging up, Ethan helped Lily finish cleaning the tools and put everything away properly. They walked back to the apartment together, her small hand in his, talking about nothing important. Inside, Lily went straight to her homework while Ethan started dinner. The routine was comforting, normal, everything the past 2 weeks hadn't been. But normal was changing whether he wanted it to or not. The calls kept coming. The opportunities kept presenting themselves. The life he'd built in the aftermath of Sarah's death, quiet, contained, focused entirely on survival and Lily's well-being, was cracking open to reveal something bigger and more complicated underneath. The question was whether he had the courage to step into that bigger life, or whether the smart thing to do was take the best offer, cash out, and retreat back into safety and simplicity. Standing in their tiny kitchen, watching Lily work through math problems at the table that wobbled unless you put a folded napkin under one leg, Ethan didn't have an answer yet. But he was starting to think that maybe the point wasn't having all the answers. Maybe the point was just showing up, doing the work, and trusting that the path would become clear as he walked it. Sarah used to say that. When the cancer diagnosis came and they didn't know how to handle it, when the treatment options were all terrible in different ways, when the future looked like nothing but darkness and pain, she'd take his hand and say that they didn't need to see the whole path. They just needed to take the next step. He'd taken the next step then, and the next one after that, all the way through her death and the grief that followed and the long process of learning to function again. This was just another series of steps, harder in some ways, easier in others. But still, just one step at a time, one decision at a time, one day at a time. Lily looked up from her homework. Daddy, what's 7 times 8? What do you think it is? She thought hard, counting on her fingers. 56? That's right, good job. She grinned and went back to her work, satisfied. And Ethan went back to making dinner, letting the simple rhythm of chopping vegetables and boiling water quiet his mind. Tomorrow he'd deal with lawyers and offers and decisions about the future. Tonight he was just a father making dinner for his daughter in a cramped kitchen, and that was enough. The meeting with Claire Bennett was scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon at a neutral location, a conference room in Jennifer Torres's office building. Ethan had asked Torres to be present for the entire conversation, not just as his lawyer, but as a witness to whatever was about to unfold. He trusted his own judgment about people less than he used to, and having someone else in the room who could read the corporate doublespeak felt necessary. Claire arrived exactly on time, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing business casual that looked expensive without being showy. She shook Torres's hand first, then Ethan's, and took a seat across the table from them without any of the commanding presence she'd projected at the competition. If anything, she looked nervous. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Claire said. "I know you're considering other offers. I appreciate you giving Velocity a chance to present ours." "Let's hear it," Ethan said. Claire opened her portfolio and pulled out a bound document. "This is a partnership proposal, not an acquisition offer. The distinction matters. We're not asking to buy your patent or hire you as an employee. We're proposing a collaborative arrangement where you maintain ownership of your intellectual property while Velocity provides manufacturing capability, distribution networks, and market access." She slid the document across the table. Torres picked it up immediately and started reading, her expression professionally neutral. "The core structure is this," Claire continued. "You license the engine design to Velocity on a non-exclusive basis. That means you can also license it to other manufacturers if you choose. We pay you a royalty of 12% on gross revenue from any vehicles or products using your engine technology. You retain all patent rights. You have final approval on any modifications to the core design. And you get a seat on our technical advisory board with genuine input into how the technology is developed and implemented." Ethan had expected an offer. He hadn't expected one this generous. Why non-exclusive? Most companies want exclusive rights. Because exclusive rights would require us to pay you significantly more upfront. And I'm guessing you'd rather have ongoing royalties than a lump sum buyout. Also, frankly, because I don't think Velocity should have a monopoly on technology this important. If your engine works the way I think it does, it should be available to the entire industry. That's better for everyone, including us. Torres was still reading, flipping through pages and occasionally making notes in the margins. "This approval clause on design modifications. Can you clarify the scope?" Does Mr. Walker have to personally review every minor adjustment, or is this limited to substantial changes? Substantial changes to the core combustion chamber design, Claire said. We're not asking you to micromanage every bolt and gasket, but if we want to fundamentally alter how the engine functions, you get veto power. That's your protection against us bastardizing your work. And this technical advisory board position, Torres said, is that symbolic or does it come with actual authority? Actual authority. You'd attend quarterly meetings, review development roadmaps, provide technical input on implementation challenges. It's a real role, not a vanity title, and it comes with a stipend of $75,000 annually, separate from royalty payments. Ethan felt his breath catch, $75,000 a year just for attending meetings and providing advice. That was more than he made at the plant, and it was in addition to royalties that could potentially be much larger. Torres caught his eye and gave a small shake of her head. Don't react yet. Stay neutral. What's the catch? Ethan asked, forcing his voice to stay level. The catch is that this only works if the engine performs as well in mass production as it did in your prototype. We'd need to do extensive testing and validation before committing to full-scale manufacturing. That process could take a year or more. During that time, you'd be receiving the advisory stipend but no royalties. If testing reveals problems we can't solve, the deal terminates, and you keep everything you've been paid up to that point. But the ongoing royalty stream doesn't materialize. That's reasonable, Torres said, surprising Ethan. Most partnerships have performance contingencies. The question is, what happens to Mr. Walker's work if testing fails? Does Velocity retain any rights to the design or derivative technologies? No, if we can't make it work, all rights revert to Mr. Walker completely. We'd be required to destroy any proprietary information related to the engine and sign documents confirming we won't pursue any competing technologies based on his design. Torres made more notes. I'll need to review this thoroughly before making a recommendation, but on the surface, it's more favorable than most corporate partnership agreements I've seen. Claire looked directly at Ethan. I meant what I said after the competition. This isn't about acquiring your technology and burying it. It's about bringing something genuinely innovative to market in a way that respects where it came from. Your engine represents the kind of engineering my father would have appreciated. I don't want to be the person who destroys that just to protect Velocity's market position. Your research director didn't seem to share that perspective, Ethan said quietly. Marcus Hendricks doesn't work for Velocity anymore. I fired him 2 days after the competition. What he did during your presentation was unprofessional and potentially legally actionable. I won't have people like that representing my company. The bluntness surprised Ethan. You fired him over that? I fired him because he went behind my back to sabotage a competitor instead of focusing on making our own work better. That's not how I want Velocity to operate. If we can't compete on the merits of our engineering, we don't deserve to win. Torres closed the proposal document. Ms. Bennett, can you give us the room for a few minutes? I'd like to discuss this with my client privately. Of course. Claire stood and gathered her materials. I'll be in the lobby. Take all the time you need. After she left, Torres turned to Ethan with an expression he couldn't quite read. This is a good offer. Surprisingly good, actually. The non-exclusive licensing, the approval rights, the advisory position, these are all things I would have negotiated for if she hadn't included them up front. So I should take it? I didn't say that. You still have the Great Lakes proposal, which has its own advantages. They're offering a slightly higher royalty rate and faster timeline to market. The question is, what matters more to you? Maximum financial return, or working with someone who seems genuinely committed to honoring your vision for this technology? Ethan thought about Claire's story about her father, about the engineering notebooks full of ideas that nobody took seriously until it was too late. He thought about her exhaustion at the competition, the way she'd looked when she admitted she'd become what she was fighting against. Can I trust her? He asked. That's not a legal question. That's a human question, and I can't answer it for you. Torres softened slightly. But I can tell you that this offer is structured in a way that limits her ability to screw you over even if she wanted to. You retain ownership. You have approval rights. The licensing is non-exclusive. Those are real protections. So the question isn't whether you trust her completely. It's whether you trust her enough to work together within a framework that protects both your interests. What would you do? Torres smiled. I'd probably go with Great Lakes. They're safer, more predictable, less complicated. But I'm a lawyer. I like safe and predictable. You're an engineer who spent 3 years building an engine in your garage while raising a daughter alone. Safe and predictable clearly isn't your style. They talked through the details for another 20 minutes, weighing pros and cons, discussing contingencies and risk scenarios. Eventually, Torres called Claire back in. "We're interested," Torres said, "but we need to make some modifications to the terms before Mr. Walker can agree. Specifically, we want a minimum guaranteed royalty payment during the testing phase, clear timelines for each stage of the validation process, and an escalation clause if the engine exceeds performance targets." "That's reasonable," Claire said. "I can bring those changes to our legal team. How soon do you need a revised proposal?" "End of the week. Mr. Walker has another offer he's considering, and we need to move forward with one or the other soon." They shook hands and Claire left, promising to have revised documents by Friday. After she was gone, Ethan sat in the conference room feeling like he'd just navigated something treacherous without quite understanding all the dangers. "Did we just commit to working with her?" he asked. "We committed to continuing the conversation, that's all. You can still back out any time before you sign the final contract." Torres started packing up her materials. "But between you and me, I think she's being sincere. That offer was too generous to be a trick. She could have lowballed you and negotiated up from there. Instead, she came in with terms that are actually fair. That suggests she wants this partnership to work long-term, which means she needs you to feel good about it." Ethan drove home feeling cautiously optimistic for the first time in weeks. The path forward wasn't completely clear yet, but it was starting to take shape. He could see possibilities that didn't involve getting exploited or losing control of his work or sacrificing his relationship with Lily for the sake of business success. That evening, he picked Lily up from Mrs. Chen's apartment where she'd been doing homework and told her they needed to have a serious talk. "Am I in trouble?" she asked immediately. "No, nothing like that. I just need to explain what's happening with the engine and how it might change things for us." They sat at the kitchen table and Ethan laid it out as simply as he could. Companies wanted to build his engine and put it in cars. That meant he might make enough money that he could quit his job at the plant, spend more time with her, maybe move somewhere nicer. But it also meant he'd have to travel sometimes for meetings and presentations. It meant their life would be different. Lily listened with the serious expression she wore when trying to understand adult things. "Different bad or different good?" "Hopefully different good, but I can't promise everything will be perfect. Change is always scary." "Will you still be home for dinner?" The question hit him harder than expected. "Most nights, yeah. I'm not going to become the kind of dad who's never around. That's not negotiable." "Okay." She thought for a moment. "Can we still work in the garage together?" "Absolutely. That's not changing." "Then I think different is okay." It was that simple for her. As long as the core things stayed stable, dinner together, time in the garage, her dad being present, the other changes were tolerable. Ethan wished he could match that simplicity, but adult complications made everything harder. The revised proposal from Velocity arrived Friday afternoon. Torres reviewed it immediately and called Ethan with her assessment. They incorporated all our changes. The minimum guaranteed payment during testing is fair, the timelines are clearly defined, and the escalation clause is actually better than what I asked for. I think this is as good as this deal is going to get. "What about Great Lakes? Should I tell them I'm going a different direction?" "Not yet. Let me reach out and see if they want to make a final competing offer. Give them one more chance to sweeten their terms. If they can't or won't, then you have your answer." Great Lakes came back Monday with a revised proposal that raised their royalty rate to 14% and shortened the testing timeline. It was a strong offer, genuinely competitive with Velocity's terms. On paper, it might have even been slightly better financially. But there was something about Claire Bennett's offer that resonated beyond the numbers. The non-exclusive licensing that allowed his engine to reach more manufacturers. The advisory board position that kept him involved in how the technology developed. The sense that she understood what it meant to build something from nothing and wanted to honor that rather than just exploit it. Tuesday morning, Ethan called Jennifer Torres and told her he wanted to accept Velocity's proposal. "You're sure?" Torres asked. "Great Lakes is offering slightly better terms in some areas." "I'm sure this feels right." "All right, I'll draw up the final contracts and schedule a signing meeting. This is going to change your life, you know. Once this goes through and manufacturing starts, you're going to be significantly wealthier than you are now. That comes with its own complications. I'll deal with those complications when they happen. The contract signing was scheduled for the following Friday. Ethan took the day off work and made arrangements for Lily to stay with Mrs. Chen. This felt like something he needed to do alone, without the distraction of keeping a 6-year-old entertained during legal proceedings. The meeting took place at Velocity's corporate headquarters, a modern glass building that made Ethan feel underdressed despite wearing the best clothes he owned. Claire met him in the lobby personally, shook his hand, and escorted him to a top-floor conference room with views of the Detroit skyline. The legal team was already assembled: 3 attorneys from Velocity, Jennifer Torres representing Ethan, and a notary to make everything official. They spent 2 hours going through the contract page by page, clarifying terms, answering questions, making sure everyone understood exactly what they were agreeing to. Finally, they reached the signature page. Ethan picked up the pen and paused. "This is real?" he said. "This is actually happening?" "It's real," Claire said. "You built something extraordinary. Now we get to help bring it to the world." Ethan signed his name. Claire signed hers. The lawyers witnessed and the notary stamped, and suddenly it was done. 3 years of work in a garage distilled into a legal agreement that would reshape his entire life. There was champagne afterward, which felt surreal. Ethan stood in Velocity's conference room drinking expensive champagne with corporate executives and lawyers, talking about manufacturing timelines and market projections, trying to process the fact that this was his life now. Claire pulled him aside while the others were discussing technical details. "I want you to know that I take this partnership seriously. Your engine is going to be treated with the respect it deserves. And if at any point you feel like we're not living up to that commitment, you call me directly. Not my assistant, not the legal team. Me. Understood?" "Understood." "Good." She smiled, and it looked genuine. "Welcome to Velocity, Mr. Walker. I think we're going to do great work together." The next few months passed in a blur of activity that Ethan struggled to keep up with. Testing began immediately, with Velocity's engineering team running his engine through validation protocols that were far more rigorous than anything he'd been able to do in his garage. The results exceeded expectations. The combustion efficiency held up under stress testing. The emissions stayed low across all operating conditions. The power output remained consistently higher than comparable displacement engines. Ethan attended the quarterly advisory board meeting and discovered that Claire hadn't been exaggerating about it being a real role. The other board members, veteran engineers from various automotive specialties, treated him as a peer, asked his opinion on technical challenges, listened when he pushed back on proposed design modifications that would have compromised the engine's core innovations. The stipend started arriving in his bank account, $75,000 a year, paid quarterly. The first payment of $18,750 showed up on a Tuesday morning, and Ethan stared at his bank balance for a full minute trying to convince himself it was real. He gave notice at the plant. His supervisor wasn't surprised, but seemed genuinely disappointed to lose him. Several coworkers asked if he could get them jobs at Velocity now that he was connected. Ethan explained that it didn't work that way, that he was a consultant, not an employee, that he had no hiring authority. Most of them didn't believe him. The National Engineering Foundation Conference in Chicago turned out to be a bigger deal than Ethan had realized. He gave a presentation about his development process to an audience of 300 engineers, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. People wanted to know how he'd solved specific technical challenges. They asked about his testing methodology. They treated him like someone whose work mattered, whose insights were valuable. David Cho from Great Lakes attended the conference and sought Ethan out afterward. "No hard feelings about going with Velocity," he said. "But if you ever develop other innovations you're looking to license, keep us in mind. We meant what we said about working with independent engineers." "I appreciate that. And honestly, your offer was excellent. This was just the right fit for this particular situation." "Fair enough. Good luck with everything." 6 months after signing the Velocity contract, Ethan and Lily moved to a new apartment. Nothing extravagant. Ethan wasn't ready for that kind of change yet, but a 2-bedroom place in a safer neighborhood with a garage that was actually big enough to work in comfortably. Lily got her own room, which she decorated with drawings and posters and all the accumulated treasures of a 7-year-old who finally had space to spread out. Mrs. Chen cried when they moved, even though the new place was only 20 minutes away, and Ethan promised she could visit any time. I'm going to miss having you two next door, she said, but I'm so happy for you. You've earned this. The first royalty payment arrived 8 months after the signing, once Velocity had completed testing and begun limited production runs. Ethan opened the envelope and stared at the check. $43,000. For 3 months of his engine being manufactured and sold. He called Jennifer Torres immediately. Is this right? The amount? Let me check the calculations. He heard typing in the background. Yes, that's correct. They sold 362 units during the quarter at an average wholesale price of $98,000 each. 12% of that is what you're holding. This is just the beginning, isn't it? As production scales up, you're going to be very comfortable. Yes. Congratulations, Mr. Walker. You've officially made it. But making it didn't feel the way Ethan had imagined it would back when he was working midnight shifts in his garage. It didn't feel like validation or triumph or proof that the struggle had been worth it. It felt like responsibility, like he now had resources to protect, a reputation to maintain, a daughter whose future was shaped by decisions he made about money and opportunity, and how to live a life that suddenly had options he'd never had before. He took Lily to dinner at a nice restaurant to celebrate, and halfway through the meal, she asked the question he'd been dreading. Are we rich now? Ethan thought carefully about his answer. We have more money than we used to, but rich is complicated. Some people with a lot less money than us feel rich because they're happy. Some people with way more money feel poor because they always want more. I think we're comfortable, and that's good enough. Do I have to act different? No, you're the same person you were before. Money doesn't change who you are. It just changes what you can do. She seemed satisfied with that and went back to her pasta. But Ethan knew the question would come up again in different forms as she got older, as their circumstances continued to evolve, as the gap between who they used to be and who they were becoming widened. A year after the contract signing, Claire invited Ethan to Velocity's annual company meeting. It was a massive event. Hundreds of employees gathered in an auditorium to hear about company performance and strategic direction. Ethan sat in the back, uncomfortable with the attention, trying to be invisible. But Claire spotted him and called him out from the stage. I want to introduce someone who represents what this company is really about. Ethan Walker is an independent engineer who built a revolutionary combustion engine in his garage while working full-time and raising a daughter alone. He didn't have corporate resources or a research team or millions in funding. He just had talent, determination, and a willingness to solve problems everyone else said were unsolvable. We're honored to partner with him, and his work is going to define Velocity's next generation of vehicles. The applause was deafening. Ethan stood awkwardly and waved, wishing he could disappear through the floor. This kind of recognition still made him deeply uncomfortable. Afterward, Claire found him in the lobby. Sorry for putting you on the spot, but people needed to see you. They needed to know that innovation doesn't just come from inside these walls. I'm not really a public figure kind of person. I know, but you might need to get used to it. The automotive press is starting to write stories about the partnership. There's going to be more attention. She was right. Over the following months, articles started appearing in industry publications. Profiles of the single father who'd built a revolutionary engine. Analyses of what his technology meant for the future of automotive efficiency. Speculation about whether other independent engineers would follow his path. Most of it was positive, but some wasn't. A few commentators questioned whether he deserved credit for work that might have been derivative of existing research. Others suggested he'd gotten lucky rather than demonstrating genuine engineering insight. The criticism stung, even though Jennifer Torres told him to ignore it. People always find reasons to diminish success they don't understand, Torres said, especially when it comes from someone who doesn't fit their expectations of what success is supposed to look like. You built something extraordinary. Don't let anyone take that away from you. 18 months after signing with Velocity, Ethan attended a product launch event where the first production vehicles featuring his engine were unveiled to the media and the public. He stood off to the side while Claire gave the presentation, explaining the technology and its benefits, highlighting the partnership with an independent engineer who'd revolutionized combustion efficiency. When the presentation ended, journalists swarmed Ethan wanting interviews. He'd prepared for this, practiced answers with Torres's help, but actually executing it was harder than he'd expected. The questions came fast and overlapping. How does it feel to see your engine in production vehicles? What's next for you? Are you working on other innovations? Do you think this success can be replicated by other independent engineers? Ethan answered as honestly as he could. Yes, seeing his work in production was surreal and gratifying. No, he wasn't working on anything new yet. He was still processing what had already happened. And yes, he thought other independent engineers could achieve similar success, but it required combination of talent, persistence, and luck that wasn't easy to replicate. One journalist asked a question that caught him off guard. Your wife passed away a few years before you built this engine, correct? How much did that loss influence your work? Ethan's first instinct was to deflect, to give a generic answer about personal tragedy and moving forward, but something made him stop and think about what he actually wanted to say. My wife Sarah was the smartest person I knew, he said quietly. She believed I could do things I didn't think I was capable of. After she died, I was lost. Building the engine wasn't about innovation or competition. It was about having something to hold on to when everything else felt like it was falling apart. It was about proving to myself and to our daughter that loss doesn't have to be the end of the story. That you can survive something terrible and still build something good on the other side. The room went quiet. Then the journalist nodded and thanked him, and Ethan realized he'd just said something more honest than any prepared statement could have been. After the event, Claire approached him with an expression he couldn't quite read. That was a good answer. About your wife. I probably shouldn't have gotten that personal. No, that's exactly what you should have done. People connect with honesty. And what you said about loss not being the end of the story, that matters. That's going to resonate with people going through their own struggles. She was right. The interview clip went viral in engineering circles and beyond. People shared it on social media with comments about their own experiences with grief and recovery. Several engineers reached out to Ethan directly, sharing stories about projects they'd built while processing loss, about using technical problem solving as a way to survive emotional devastation. One email came from a woman whose husband had died in a construction accident, leaving her with 2 young kids and no idea how to move forward. Reading about your engine and how you built it while grieving your wife gave me hope, she wrote. I'm not an engineer, but I started taking night classes in accounting because I need something that's mine, something I'm building toward. Thank you for showing me that it's possible to survive this and still have a future worth working toward. Ethan read that email 3 times, then showed it to Lily. She was 8 now, old enough to understand more about what her father had accomplished and why it mattered. People think your engine helps them? She asked. Not the engine exactly, the story behind it. The fact that I built something good during a bad time. It helps them believe they can do the same thing. Mama would like that. Yeah, I think she would. 2 years after the signing, Velocity's vehicles featuring Ethan's engine technology were selling well enough that the royalty payments had become substantial. Ethan was making more money than he'd ever imagined possible, enough that Torres suggested he start thinking about financial planning and investment strategies. You're going to keep generating significant income for years, she explained. You need to think about how to manage it responsibly. College funds for Lily, retirement planning, maybe some investments that can generate passive income. This is more money than most people know how to handle without professional help. Ethan hired a financial advisor, set up college funds and retirement accounts, invested in relatively safe index funds that would grow steadily over time. It all felt surreal and slightly ridiculous. Him, the guy who'd been buying parts for his engine with whatever was left after paying rent and groceries, now discussing portfolio diversification and tax optimization strategies. But the financial security meant something more important than luxury. It meant Lily's future was protected. It meant he could afford to take risks on projects that mattered to him rather than just chasing money. It meant the constant low-level anxiety about whether they could afford basic necessities was finally, permanently gone. On the 3rd anniversary of Sarah's death, Ethan took Lily to visit her mother's grave. They did this every year, bringing flowers and sitting quietly together. This year, Ethan told Sarah about the engine, about the partnership with Velocity, about how the work he'd done in grief had turned into something that would provide for their daughter's future. I kept my promise, he said quietly. I didn't give up. I built something good. And Lily's going to be okay. Lily squeezed his hand. We're both going to be okay, Daddy. Yeah, sweetheart, we are. 3.5 years after the Detroit competition, Ethan received an invitation to speak at the National Academy of Engineering's annual symposium. It was one of the most prestigious events in the field, attended by the top minds in engineering from across the country. Being asked to speak there was recognition that his work had achieved genuine significance. He almost declined. Public speaking still made him uncomfortable, and the symposium was the same weekend as Lily's school play. But Lily insisted he should go. "Mama would want you to," she said with the certainty of a 9-year-old who believed she understood what her mother would have wanted. "And I'll have other plays. This is important." So Ethan went. He gave a presentation about independent innovation, about building revolutionary technology outside traditional institutional frameworks, about what it took to survive the process and emerge with both your work and your integrity intact. The response was overwhelming. Engineers approached him afterward with their own stories of independent projects, of struggling to get recognition, of wondering if their work would ever matter. One young woman told him she'd been on the verge of abandoning her research on alternative fuel systems because she couldn't get funding or institutional support. Hearing his story had convinced her to keep going. "You showed me it's possible," she said, "that you don't need a corporation or a university backing you to do work that matters. You just need to be good enough and stubborn enough to see it through." Flying home afterward, Ethan thought about that conversation, about how his story had become bigger than just an engine or a competition or a business partnership. It had become proof that the path to innovation wasn't exclusively controlled by institutions and corporations, that someone working alone with limited resources could still change the field if their work was good enough and they refused to give up. That evening, he picked Lily up from Mrs. Chen's apartment and drove them home. The garage was waiting, bigger and better equipped than the cramped space where he'd built the original engine, but still fundamentally the same. A place to solve problems, build things, teach his daughter about how mechanical systems worked. "Can we work on something tonight?" Lily asked. "I want to learn about transmissions." "Transmissions are complicated." "So is your engine, but you figured it out." Ethan smiled. "Fair point. Let's see what we can do." They spent the evening in the garage together, Ethan explaining gear ratios and torque conversion, while Lily asked questions and took notes in a small notebook she'd started keeping. Watching her lean over the workbench with the same focused attention he brought to engineering problems, Ethan recognized something he'd been too close to see clearly before. This was Sarah's legacy too. Not just the engine or the success or the financial security. It was this: a daughter who believed problems could be solved, who wasn't afraid of complexity, who thought building things was a reasonable response to challenges. Sarah had given her that, and Ethan had tried his best to nurture it. "Daddy?" Lily looked up from her notes. "When I grow up, I want to build engines too, like you." "You can build whatever you want, sweetheart. Engines or rockets or robots or anything else that interests you. But I want to build engines, because that's what you and Mama would have wanted." Ethan's throat tightened. "Your mama wanted you to be happy, that's all. If engines make you happy, then build engines. If something else makes you happy, build that instead. The important thing is that you build something, that you make things instead of just consuming them, that you solve problems instead of just complaining about them." She nodded seriously and went back to her notes. Ethan watched her for a moment, then returned to explaining how planetary gear sets worked. 4 years after the competition, Claire called Ethan with news that Velocity was being acquired by a larger manufacturer. The deal was complex, involving stock swaps and board restructuring and all the corporate machinery that Ethan barely understood. What mattered was what Claire told him directly. "Your contract is protected. The acquiring company has agreed to honor all existing partnerships and licensing arrangements. You'll continue receiving royalties and your advisory board position remains unchanged. The only difference is you'll be working with new executives who might have different priorities than I did." "What about you? What happens to you?" "I'm staying on for 2 years to manage the transition, then I'll probably move on to something else. This was never going to be forever." "I'm sorry. I know you built Velocity from almost nothing. And now it's big enough to be valuable to a major player. That's success, even if it feels like losing something." She paused. "I wanted to thank you, actually. Your engine was a big part of why the acquisition was attractive. You helped make this company worth buying." "You made it worth buying. I just provided one piece of technology. Don't diminish what you did. Your work mattered. It still matters. And working with you reminded me why I got into this business in the first place. So thank you for that." After they hung up, Ethan sat with the news for a while. Change was coming again, whether he wanted it or not. New executives, new priorities, new uncertainties about how his partnership would be treated going forward. But the contract was solid. Torres had made sure of that, and he'd survived bigger uncertainties than a corporate acquisition. 5 years after the Detroit competition, Ethan received a letter from Robert Chen, the judge who'd first suggested he get legal representation. Chen was retiring and wanted to let Ethan know how proud he was to have been part of recognizing his work. "I've judged hundreds of innovations over my career," Chen wrote. "Very few had the potential to genuinely change the industry. Yours was one of them. More importantly, very few came from people who understood that engineering is ultimately about solving real problems for real people, not just chasing patents and profit margins. You understood that. It showed in your work. Thank you for reminding an old engineer why this field matters." Ethan kept that letter in his desk drawer, pulling it out occasionally when the business complications got overwhelming or when he questioned whether the partnership had been worth the loss of simplicity in his life. 6 years after the competition, Lily turned 12 and started asking more sophisticated questions about her father's work. She wanted to understand not just how the engine worked mechanically, but why certain design choices had been made, what problems each innovation solved, how the whole system fit together conceptually. Ethan taught her everything he could. They spent evenings in the garage working through engineering principles, building models, testing theories. She had Sarah's intelligence and his stubbornness, a combination that suggested she really might follow through on her plan to build engines someday. One evening, after they'd finished working on a scale model of a combustion chamber, Lily asked a question that caught him off guard. "Did you build the engine because you missed Mama, or because you wanted to prove something to yourself?" Ethan thought carefully about his answer. "Both, I think. After she died, I felt like I'd failed at the most important thing, keeping her alive, keeping our family intact. Building the engine was partly about having a problem I could actually solve, where the rules made sense and hard work produced results. But it was also about proving I hadn't given up completely, that I could still build something good even when everything felt broken." Do you still feel broken? Sometimes, but less than I used to. And I think that's what healing looks like. Not erasing the broken parts, but learning to function despite them. Learning to build things around the cracks instead of pretending they don't exist. She nodded like that made sense. "I think Mama would be proud of you, not just for the engine, but for being a good dad while everything was hard." The words hit him like a physical blow. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot." 7 years after the competition, Ethan was invited to give a keynote address at the Detroit International Automotive Innovation Summit, the same competition where everything had started. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of engineers and executives and innovators, Ethan thought about how much had changed. He talked about the importance of independent innovation, about building things for the right reasons, about surviving loss and finding purpose in creation. He talked about Sarah, about Lily, about the garage that had been his refuge during the darkest period of his life. "Engineering isn't just about technical solutions," he said toward the end. "It's about human problems. Why do we need more efficient engines? Because real people are struggling with fuel costs and environmental damage. Why do we keep innovating even when it's hard? Because real people need the problems we solve. The moment you forget that your work serves actual human needs, you've lost the plot. You're just chasing patents and profit margins instead of building things that matter." The applause was substantial, but what mattered more were the conversations afterward. Young engineers telling him his story had inspired them to keep working on independent projects. Executives admitting they'd been too focused on quarterly returns and needed to remember why they got into this field. People connecting with the human story underneath the technical achievement. Claire attended the summit and sought him out afterward. She looked different, less corporate, more relaxed. The acquisition had finalized months earlier, and she was clearly transitioning away from Velocity. "That was a good speech," she said. "Honest. That's rare at these events. I don't really know how to be anything else anymore. Tried being careful and corporate for a while. It didn't fit right. Good. Don't change." She hesitated. "I wanted you to know that working with you changed how I think about this business. Before your engine, I was so focused on winning that I'd lost track of why winning mattered. You reminded me there's more to success than market dominance, so thank you for that." You gave my work a chance when a lot of people wouldn't have. I'm the one who should be thanking you. Then let's call it even, she smiled. What are you working on next? I can't imagine you're content just collecting royalties. Ethan thought about the new project he'd been sketching in his notebook late at night, a different approach to hybrid power systems that might solve some of the limitations in current designs. There might be something, too early to talk about it yet. When it's ready, call me. I'm starting a new venture capital fund focused on independent engineering projects. I want to help people like you, talented engineers with good ideas who just need resources and support to bring them to market. Interested? Maybe. Let me think about it. They shook hands and Claire walked away, leaving Ethan with the realization that his story wasn't over. The engine had been the beginning, not the destination. There were more problems to solve, more innovations to develop, more ways to honor Sarah's belief that he was capable of extraordinary things. 8 years after the competition, on a quiet Saturday morning, Ethan drove the old 1974 Dodge out of the garage one last time. The car looked different now. He'd finally fixed the rusted panels, replaced the cracked windshield, got proper paint work done. The exterior finally matched the extraordinary engine underneath. Lily sat beside him in the passenger seat, 13 now, and growing into someone who looked more like her mother every day. They drove through their old neighborhood, past the duplex where they used to live, past the library and the diner, and all the places that had been part of their life before everything changed. "Why did you want to drive this route?" Lily asked. "Because I don't want to forget where we came from. It's easy to get comfortable with how things are now and forget what it took to get here. This car, this neighborhood, those years after your mom died, they're part of the story. The hard parts matter as much as the success. Do you miss how things used to be? Some parts. Life was simpler. Harder, but simpler. No complicated business decisions or media attention or people wanting things from me. Just you and me in the garage." He glanced over at her. "But I don't regret how things turned out. We're okay now. We're better than okay." "We're good," Lily said firmly. "We're really good." They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the Dodge's engine humming with that perfect smoothness that still surprised Ethan sometimes. All those nights in the garage, all those calculations and failed prototypes and moments of doubt, they'd led here. To a Saturday morning drive with his daughter, to financial security, to recognition from the engineering community, to proof that survival could lead to something more than just getting by. The car still looked a little out of place among the modern vehicles on the road. Too old, too square-edged, too obviously from a different era. But underneath that aging exterior was technology that represented the future. And somehow that felt appropriate, a reminder that innovation could come from unexpected places, that broken-looking things could contain extraordinary capabilities, that judging by appearances meant missing what really mattered. Ethan thought about Sarah, about the promise he'd made at her funeral to keep building, keep moving forward, keep being the father their daughter deserved. He'd kept that promise. Some days it had been harder than others, and he'd made mistakes along the way, but he'd kept going. The engine was proof of that. Lily was proof of that. This life they'd built together, complicated and imperfect but fundamentally good, was proof of that. "Daddy?" Lily's voice pulled him back to the present. "Can we go get breakfast at that diner you and Mama used to go to?" "Yeah, sweetheart, that sounds perfect." They drove on through the morning light, the old Dodge carrying them forward with the steady reliability of something built right, something designed to last, something that proved the broken things could be repaired and the impossible problems could be solved, and the grief that threatened to destroy you could be transformed into something that sustained you instead. And maybe that was the real lesson underneath all the engineering and the competition and the business success. That humans were resilient in ways they didn't recognize until tested. That loss didn't have to be the end of the story. That you could survive something terrible and still build a life worth living on the other side. Not a perfect life. Perfection was a fantasy, but a real one, with all the complications and struggles and unexpected joys that came with actually engaging with the world instead of just retreating from it. The engine had been Ethan's way of proving that to himself. But the life he'd built with Lily, the relationships he'd formed, the way he'd learned to carry grief without being consumed by it, that was the real achievement. The engine was just metal and mathematics. The life was human and messy and infinitely more valuable. They pulled into the diner parking lot, and Ethan turned off the engine. For a moment, he just sat there, hand on the key, taking in the sound of Lily unbuckling her seatbelt and the smell of coffee drifting from inside the restaurant and the warmth of morning sun through the windshield. "You coming?" Lily asked, already opening her door. "Yeah," Ethan said, smiling. "Right behind you." And he was. Right behind her and beside her and wherever she needed him to be. Because that was the promise that mattered most. Not the one about engines or success or proving himself to the world, but the one about being present, being steady, being the kind of father who showed up even when it was hard. They walked into the diner together, the old Dodge sitting quiet in the parking lot, its rusted-looking exterior hiding the revolutionary engine underneath. Some people passing by probably still saw it as junk, but Ethan knew better. He knew that the most valuable things were often the ones that didn't advertise themselves, that broke conventions, that proved you didn't need to look perfect to be extraordinary. Just like the life he'd built. Just like the daughter walking beside him. Just like the future stretching out ahead of them, uncertain but full of possibility, because they'd learned how to face uncertainty together and come out stronger on the other side. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything that mattered.